If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to MINDSHOCK. This is a logical analysis of Dr. Todd Grande, a YouTuber who is a PhD. He's a licensed chemical dependency counselor. He has a PhD in counselor education and supervision. He is a licensed professional counselor of mental health. So he's someone who's taking his knowledge, what he's memorized in indoctrination facilities, and giving his takes on various true crime cases, conspiracies, general topics in the mainstream. And I actually like the guy. I think he has some very interesting points. Obviously, he's blinded by scientism, and we'll be taking a look at how that manifests, why it's so interesting. This was a logical analysis that was requested. So I will be going over his approach and his processing of information. He has a unique way of how he gets triggered, and he has a very, very good control of his own speech pattern and presentation, which is quite interesting. So for that alone, it's worth a look. So we'll be going over a lot of that. As usual, if you enjoy the podcast and you find it interesting going over topics that nobody else wants to discuss with objective logic and reason at the forefront, without falling for logical fallacies or biases of any kind, you can support our channel. You can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Everything helps us get more mind-shocking logical analyses out there, as well as coverage in multiple true crime cases, conspiracy theories, and various topics nobody wants to talk about, including supernatural and paranormal topics. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, make sure you allow your device to have those notifications come through. If it's still not working, you could just go to youtube.com/mindshock to check the latest podcasts as they are released and manually peruse our ever-expanding back catalog. If you liked this episode, hit that like button, share it across social media platforms. Let's bring logic and reason back to the world where it seems to be going extinct at an exponential rate. You could also check us out on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. It would be helpful if you just double check empirically verifiable definitions of words that you're using in the comment section, just to avoid wasting time. Obviously, everybody has their opinions, but the objectively, empirically verifiable definitions of words are not what people subjectively perceive to be. They are what they actually are. Anybody can check it in the dictionary. So if you want to just save some time, that is much appreciated. So we'll be taking a look at this video here where Dr. Todd Grande titled it, "How Do People Come to Believe in Conspiracy Theories? Nature, Formation, and Personalities."
Welcome to my scientifically informed insider look at mental health topics.
So he calls it scientifically informed looks at mental health topics. Now, of course, I don't hear him talking about scientism. And as Upton Sinclair once said, it's very difficult to get a man to understand something that his paycheck depends on him not understanding. So, of course, we also have to factor in the Dunning-Kruger effect. I mean, is Dr. Todd Grande's ego so out of control? He thinks he is immune, and he thinks he doesn't fall for any of these fallacies. Let's see if he does. Let's see if he bases a lot of his scientism belief systems on faith, and how heavily indoctrinated he is, and is he able to look at things objectively without falling for logical fallacies or leaning on this faith, the religion of scientism that he was indoctrinated into. Was he hopelessly indoctrinated into this cult of scientism and authority worship, or is there hope for Dr. Todd Grande? this is what we'll be looking at, and we'll be looking at whether or not he's psychologically projecting and all these things, because this is a mental health professional. This guy must know at least the basics of psychological projection and how the ego can keep people on really short strings and prevent them from understanding the truth, how cognitive dissonance and mental weakness works, just sometimes manifesting in pure denial. So he must know these things. So the question is he intentionally not referencing them and pretending they don't exist, pretending that scientism doesn't exist, or pretending that people can't be indoctrinated, pretending that the way the educational system and academia, or quackademia, the way that it works isn't by asking people to regurgitate propaganda on command as gospel. Does it really teach how to think, not just what to think? And I think Dr. Todd Grande would be a good benchmark, a good metric here. And again, we'll be examining whether he's honest or dishonest, because it's hard to believe that he's reached this level of indoctrination without even covering the basics of human psychology. And you would think a PhD would at least have a children's level understanding of logic, but let's see.
Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, how do people come to believe in conspiracy theories? So I'm going to use the acronym CT for conspiracy theories here in this video. Also, I have questions around the personality profile of people to believe in CTs, the self-perception of conspiracy theorists, so how do they look at themselves?
So right off the bat, he's falling for a couple different fallacies. So he's falling these false dichotomies as well. I mean, if he were truly honest and objective, why is there no video on how people come to believe in coincidence theories or official narratives, despite how often the corrupt profiteers delivering the official narratives are incorrect, either by flat-out deception and lying or just basic human fallibility? And of course, you would have to address scientism and the cult of authority worship in order to honestly look at these things. He's not doing that, or at least not yet. Let's see if he does. He's also going with these faith-based presuppositions that it's either crazy or wrong to believe in conspiracy theories, even though he's not explicitly stating that. That's what the connotation is. Again, just even based on his own facial expressions, the connotation is that at least the majority of conspiracy theories are false. Or what is his working definition? Because I think in a lot of these cases, in these analyses, you have to give your working definitions, because if his premise is completely wrong about what a conspiracy theory is, which most people's are, because again, with the CIA mainstream media propaganda campaign against critical thinking, instead of just taking the word of corrupt liars on the 88 box as gospel, that's the default that most people that advocate for scientism and authority worship, that's what they advocate for. Worshipping the government, worshipping experts like the Church of the CDC, the Church of NASA, whatever the case may be. The church of whatever institution one receives an indoctrination degree from. That's the issue, and for some reason, I'm skeptical that he's going to address these issues. So he's kind of already starting off with fallacies, hasty generalization, logical fallacies, because conspiracy theorists, this is a wide range of people. So by committing all of these fallacies right off the bat, he's not giving an intelligent impression of just even the landscape of conspiracy theory or how it fits into the world. How does it compare and contrast with the corrupt profiteers, the official narratives that are most of the time wrong? Again, we have to look at the context of history, because there's a very big difference with the crackpot tinfoil hat guy in his mom's basement who believes everything he reads on 4chan about lizard people and all of these things. Now, I'm not saying it's not true, but there's a certain percentage of conspiracy theorists, a vast minority, but people like Dr. Todd Grande, and in the mainstream, people always pretend that this minority is the majority in order to attack it. So this is a combination of a strawman logical fallacy and also a compositional logical fallacy, where he's pretending that a small part actually represents the whole and then attacks it as such, which is very deceptive. Now, what we have to figure out is he doing it on purpose? Is Dr. Todd Grande honestly doing this? Or is he simply a goofy individual and extremely illogical while thinking he's logical, and his ego will not allow himself to re-examine his own competency? Again, that's why we must refer to the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect does not mean he's a stupid man. In fact, it could mean the opposite, that he's so incredibly intelligent, it didn't occur to him that he could have missed some of the basics because he's so far ahead in certain areas, but his ego is too extreme because of his intellect. So again, these are all things that need to be examined.
How would they describe their approach to philosophy and science? And also, how and why do conspiracy theorists resist the authority of scientific institutions, scientists, and the production of knowledge through the scientific method?
So already there are a lot of conflation, obfuscation, and misunderstanding of the difference between the scientific method and scientism. So already there he has connected the scientific method and scientific authorities. So and again, not one word, he did not mention scientism, the cult of authority worship, or the corrupt. Because again, absolute power corrupts absolutely. This is nothing new. So historical context really needs to be kept in mind, which again, coincidence theorists like supposedly Dr. Todd Grande, if he is a hardcore coincidence theorist, he's basically denying the blatant corruption or fallibility of humans in positions of power. He's also not understanding burden of proof. I did a podcast on burden of proof recently. This is critical. If you want to understand conspiracy theorists, how they differ from coincidence theorists and scientism cultists, you have to understand how burden of proof works. If Dr. Todd Grande does not understand burden of proof, if he does not understand the scientific method while thinking he does, now I'm not saying he does or he doesn't, I'm just saying from his opening statement here, there's so many fundamental flaws, he's opened with a stack of fallacies, so that does not bode well. So with his conflation of the scientism authority, he called scientific authority, and that was gained by the scientific method. That's the thing. If these corrupt authorities of scientism churches, if they say they followed the scientific method when they actually didn't, that's the difference between scientism and science. So if he doesn't understand the difference, and if his Dunning-Kruger is too severe to see that conspiracy theorists understand the difference and he doesn't, then this whole analysis of his is just an exhibition of his own incompetence, his own Dunning-Kruger, and how much his ego manipulates him with all of these misconceptions. So he's basically doing a video here on the misconceptions and the strawmans of the mainstream against critical thinkers, aka non-coincidence theorists who just swallow whatever they see on the idiot box from corrupt profiteers.
So kind of a lot of different questions here related to conspiracy theories, but I'm mostly looking at the nature and the formation of the beliefs. So I've mentioned before when I talk about conspiracy theories how there is a relationship sometimes to delusional thinking, which of course is pathological.
And while true, again, this is also the case, possibly more so for coincidence theorists and scientism cultists, but you won't find him talking about that. Because again, as Upton Sinclair once said, it's very difficult to get a man to understand something which his salary depends on him not understanding. Now again, that doesn't mean he's wrong about conclusions. That just means he can't have the farce of authority worship exposed, because that exposes him. Even if he's correct about things, that still exposes the entire institutions, the corrupt institutions. So there is a certain amount of delusion as well. And then as I've gone over, I did a podcast on mental weakness. Some people are too mentally weak to confront these harsh truths of reality that bad people don't always act alone. So some people have the mental strength, some people don't. And again, he's not talking about that here, which is betraying his own ignorance here. But it's still a useful exercise, so let's keep going here.
But I'm not really talking about that level of believing in conspiracy theory, not talking about somebody who has a mental disorder that has delusions and therefore they believe in conspiracy theories, but rather non-pathological presentations. So people that simply look at the evidence in whatever way they look at the evidence and determine that a conspiracy theory must be true.
So how is that different than a coincidence theorist examining coincidences, writing all coincidences and anomalies off as nothing to see here, and continuing to believe the narratives of proven liars. See, when you're not, this is again why controls are so important. So if this guy, if he's goofy enough to start talking about scientific authorities and the scientific method, but he doesn't know what controls are, that's an issue. Because if you're not examining the controls, what is standard, what is deviation, what is within standard deviation, you have to compare and contrast. Otherwise, you're just falling for all these fallacies and reasserting faith-based beliefs. These are just circular reasoning, logical fallacies. He also, thus far, obviously we're just starting, but we'll see if he mentions conspiracy facts. Because a lot of conspiracy theories were nonsense, like MK Ultra, Gulf of Tonkin, Operation Northwoods. These things would be considered nonsense at one point in time. Now they're factually proven. And I mean, even something like chemtrails, switching the label to geoengineering and aerosol spraying, for coincidence theorists, that's enough to pretend there was no chemtrail conspiracy that was true. Obviously, a chemtrail is simply a chemical trail that was not exhaust fume. That's what the conspiracy was. Now, there's a whole bunch of different variants, what the reasons for spraying, exactly what it was, whether it was that's all besides the point. What was in the sky was not exhaust fume. That was the conspiracy theory. The main gist of it. And then, of course, it branched off. So he doesn't address any of those things, making his agenda clear here. He's doing a hit piece on conspiracy theories with all these faith-based presuppositions and circular logical fallacies. Again, I still haven't determined whether he's honest or not. That's what we'll be doing. If his Dunning-Kruger is just that severe and his ego dominates him, his ego's got him on such short strings, that he might be honestly presenting this. But again, that would not make him correct or any less silly. That would just make him honest instead of dishonest. In fact, being dishonest would actually mean he would be more intelligent because he would realize these things.
So again, not talking about mental disorders, just talking about people that are within normal range for mental health symptoms. Now, at the end of this video, I'm going to be talking about the alien lizard humanoids, which is kind of one of my favorite conspiracy theories. I would have to say it is my favorite conspiracy theory.
And again, why is it his favorite? So he really betrays himself here because that's obviously what some would say is one of the most ridiculous or unbelievable ones or more laughable. So there's an appeal to ridicule and also an appeal to extreme and also a straw man logical fallacy and also a compositional logical fallacy. He's roped all of these fallacies in together in an attempt to attack the tiny percentage of conspiracy theorists who might believe these things without evidence and make it look like this is the majority of conspiracy theorists who believe in the majority of conspiracy theories, which is obviously false, obviously very disingenuous. So he's obviously not being 100% honest here. Now, the degree of dishonesty, of course, is unknown because from his opening statements, it does not appear that he understands all of these other factors or even these basic logical fallacies. I could be wrong, of course. It'd be nice if he did a rebuttal on this, because I am genuinely curious on how someone can reach this level of indoctrination without even covering the basics of logic or even the basics of ego domination and psychology. Again, that's why the Dunning-Kruger effect comes in. He thinks because he's a mental health professional, he just assumes that he'd be able to recognize these things in himself, so he doesn't even have the discipline or the control over the ego to re-examine the basics, the base premises. Because if everything he believes is a house of cards, you have to be brave to examine those base layers. Because that might mean everything on top has been a waste of time, and he can't do that. Again, he's too invested in the cult of scientism and authority worship. But it would be interesting if he did a rebuttal to this particular analysis, because I would like to hear his opinion on all these points and why he has failed to address them in what is essentially a hit piece here.
And again, toward the end of the video, I'm going to be talking about a television show that I saw one time and how maybe that led to this particular CT being my favorite. I don't know, but there's really no science involved in that part, so I'm going to save that to the end of the video so you can see kind of what the research literature has to say, and then if you're interested, stay for that story about what may have influenced my thinking on the alien lizard humanoid conspiracy theory. So, what happens with CTs? We see that when people believe in conspiracy theories, official explanations for events are challenged, reconstructed, and contested. So we see kind of this theory of a vast, insidious, international conspiratorial network designed to perpetrate nefarious acts.
So, wow. Okay, not really. See, that's a big straw man because, again, he just roped in and conflated many different things. Now, was it intentional or not? What level of silliness is this man operating with naturally? I don't know. I don't pretend to know. So, he just described conspiracy theorists, CTers, as critical thinkers. You're supposed to question everything. That's the very nature of science. Science is skepticism. It's not taking things on faith. So he's saying they disbelieve the official story. It doesn't matter whether it's official or unofficial. If you're presented something, a theory, the official coincidence theory, the official narrative, whatever it is, the nature of science is to question and verify, to test these hypotheses or theories, not just accept them on faith. So he's twisting all of this around as to try to make scientism the default, the religion of scientism being default, where the authority-worshipping cultists, they expect everyone to just take it on faith outright and question nothing. That's how he's framed it here. So again, he's making it very clear that he's not objective, logical, or neutral, or scientific in any fashion.
So they're usually not benign. Like the beliefs are about something kind of scary, not something really neutral.
Well, false again. I mean, there's so many different kinds of conspiracy theories. So again, he has a fundamental lack of understanding of what a conspiracy even is, because he has so vastly overestimated his intelligence. I don't mean because of his PhD, even if he had no PhD, just the manner in which he's speaking, he's just an average human. There's a reason Mark Twain said it's easier to fool someone than convince them they've been fooled. So even if he was, let's say, a high school dropout, it's just standard human nature to not want to believe that you've been fooled. Again, Mark Twain, not a stupid man, he made astute observations. That was one of them. So he doesn't consider the possibility, again, there's a reason why conspiracy theorists, so to speak, critical thinkers, scientifically minded individuals, not scientism cultists, who are just take everything on blind faith from corrupt profiteers, ignoring all of history. So would you believe proven liars? Now, obviously, he doesn't think about it that way because he's been so heavily indoctrinated into this cult of scientism and authority worship. So this fundamental lack of understanding that conspiracy theories, they could be very benign. There's a whole bunch of different... A conspiracy theory is basically more than one individual engaged in some kind of nefarious plot. Now, nefarious is a wide range. So sometimes, of course, it could involve killing people or robbing people. So it could be more benign. Just for kicks, getting people to believe something that's not real without damaging effects. That would still classify as a conspiracy. Because you're basically trying to trick someone. Now, that comes down to, again, I don't want to get into semantics, logical fallacies here. Is it benign to trick? I guess you could say maybe not. But there's a vast range of what nefarious could mean. Obviously, criminal conspiracies prosecuted every day. It's nothing new. Criminals do not always act alone. It's as simple as that. And again, all this strawmanning and obfuscating, this is a giveaway of coincidence theorists and scientism cultists like Dr. Todd Grande that he's actually not being objective, neutral, scientific in any way.
They typically involve interpreting errant data. So what that means is whenever something happens, there are certain things we can look at in that situation that can help explain what happened, and then there's other elements that are unaccounted for in the official narrative. So people that believe in CTs tend to really focus on those unaccounted for pieces.
Okay, wrong again. So he might be correct about a vast small minority who do that, but the vast majority of conspiracy theorists, critical thinkers, they simply understand how actual science works, how the burden of proof works. So someone like him, who doesn't understand basic logic, who doesn't understand how severely indoctrinated he is, he's just going to take whatever he sees on the idiot box as on faith, on blind faith religiously as gospel. Whereas a conspiracy theorist wouldn't necessarily believe or disbelieve. That's the other thing he's not really understanding, because the burden of proof always falls on the positive claim. So if there's a so-called official narrative reported on the idiot box, there's a positive claim that something occurred in a particular way. Who does the burden of proof lie on? The burden of proof lies on these corrupt authorities to prove what they are reporting is actually true. It does not fall on the conspiracy theorist or critical thinker or science-minded individual, a logical individual, to disprove. Again, a fundamental lack of understanding of what conspiracy theories are, what conspiracy theorists are, and how the burden of proof works is the real issue here, and I'm sure he'll be spinning in circles with this issue based on his own fundamental lack of understanding that his Dunning-Kruger will not allow him to and ego will not allow him to re-examine.
As evidence of a conspiracy rather than just of evidence of an anomaly. Anomalies happen with every event. Again, we look at any event, we're not going to be able to fully explain why it happened.
Okay, wow. Now we're really seeing some either, again, extreme dishonesty or extreme silliness. Because if he's this bereft of logic and reason, there's a very, very big difference. This is where comparing and contrasting comes into play, because you can compare and contrast different reported events. Sure, there might be some small anomalies in events that are most likely true, but there's a big difference. A very, very big difference between different events. So the events that are contested, or let's say the favorites of conspiracy theorists, they deny certain events took place. Those events have so many anomalies and so many coincidences. He's creating these false dichotomies and these straw man arguments. This is all fallacies. So far, this man has spewed nothing but fallacies. And I actually like the guy. I've seen a lot of his other takes on other videos. Some of them, especially with serial killers, some of them are pretty astute observations. But again, that's where he's talking his forte. His forte, obviously, here is not conspiracy theorist or historical analysis of corrupt profiteers. Or what's strange to me is that there's again, unless he's triggered. See, if he's heavily triggered, then his logic switch has been turned off. Now, he obviously has good control. He is a mental health professional. He's not going to be melting down like some of these other people when they're triggered, like Joe Rogan or these goofballs that are easily triggered. This is a man who has a certain amount of discipline in his outward behaviors. So he's not going to melt down, but triggering, again, when someone is triggering, when their faith-based belief system has been attacked or threatened, he's going to shut off logic and reason that he does possess and he can exhibit when he's not triggered, and that's what we're seeing here as well.
There's going to be elements of the event that we don't know about or that we don't have the capability to measure. So the CT mindset really looks at specific events as being too complex or too convenient to have arisen by chance alone.
Not necessarily. Again, pretty much everything he's stating here is false. He's also pretending that he's this hasty generalization logical fallacy, false dichotomy, compositional logical fallacy that he built this entire video on is so silly that we might be in for a long one here, because we're only in the beginning here, and already I've had to correct him so many times for just fundamental lacks of understanding in pretty much everything he's talking about. So he's pretending to know why conspiracy theorists think this or that. It's all wrong. Except, obviously, I'm sure we can find some anecdotal evidence where he does describe some kind of vast minority who do operate in this way, but it's such a vast minority, it's almost irrelevant to talk about it. Like, there are intelligent coincidence theorists out there too, but there's such a vast minority. If I were to do a video on why people believe in coincidence theories, I wouldn't focus on the most minute portion of coincidence theorists, unless that was specifically stated in the video. So with these hasty generalization logical fallacies, he's pretending that all conspiracy theorists simply go in that direction. Obviously not. obviously that's the whole point of theorizing. It could be A, it could be B, it could be C. Whereas a coincidence theorist or scientism cultist, they're the ones. So I guess we're going to get here some psychological projection from Dr. Todd Grande, where he's saying that these anomalies or coincidences, they're not enough to convince him that humans are fallible or corrupt profiteers are corrupt profiteers despite a proven history of it. He's still going to believe in the coincidence theory no matter what.
And this is really well illustrated by the expression that we see common with people that believe in CTs: nothing happens by accident.
I've actually never heard that. So, and I've been studying conspiracies for a few decades now. Again, this is mind shock. I never assert anything is true or untrue in general. Obviously, there are things that are referred to as factually proven to the best of the ability that it can be proven, but that's different than just theorizing on lizard aliens. Obviously, there's a lot of different things, a lot of different theories, and they need to be addressed accurately. That's the whole point of mind shock. So I've actually never heard that expression, and I've seen a lot of conspiracy theory material. So, I mean, I've heard there's no such thing as a coincidence. I mean, I guess that's his main point there. But how does he refute this point? Because what he just said, there's always things you're not going to know. So there could be connections that aren't known. Whether that proves the conspiracy or not, that doesn't prove that they're not related.
And because they believe that nothing happens by accident, this leads them to all these really sophisticated and complex plots.
Not necessarily. A lot of these plots are quite simple. Follow the money. So again, he's strawmanning here and pretending that all these plots have to be extremely complex. And again, some of them are, and if they are, they are. Obviously, being a complex plot doesn't mean it didn't happen. Again, you could study all, Enron. You could study a lot of different things that some people might describe as complex that are factually proven. Being complex doesn't mean it didn't happen. Again, nothing but fallacies here from Dr. Todd Grande. I probably shouldn't have even watched this video. I would have had a lot more respect for him, because a lot of his other videos are actually, like I said, this is not a stupid man. But when people are triggered, logic goes out the window.
We see that people who believe in conspiracy theories have a tendency to distrust authorities. They typically have feelings of powerlessness.
Wow. Okay, so that's two completely different things. So the obfuscation now going off the chart. So on the first point, yes, there is a distrust of corrupt liars. Yes. Some people would call that just healthy skepticism. Trust by verify. I mean, this is basic human nature. The fact that he's a mental health professional and he thinks the default position should be to always trust people. Now, here's the thing. I don't necessarily disagree with him when you're talking about a common man, a man not in positions of power. Even then, you should probably still be cautious. There are strangers on the street that would rob you. I wouldn't say the majority. I would say the minority. But in general, now when you're talking about authorities, corrupt authorities are corrupt, so of course people would distrust these authorities. The whole point of science is skepticism. So, of course, there's a certain matter of not trusting criminals. Conspiracy theorists do not trust criminals and liars. This man is correct about that. Now, as far as hopelessness or powerlessness, that's individual. Like a lot of coincidence, I would say more coincidence theorists feel powerless, so they have to believe in this fairy tale that the government is their friend and cares about them, and that there's some kind of law and order, and that the corrupt politicians are not corrupt because then the world would be too scary for them, or some of these other conspiracies. They can't believe in them because it's just too scary. And they need that illusion of safety so they don't feel powerless. Whereas conspiracy theorists, they're mostly just realists. So would that give you more or less power? Knowledge is power. Has Dr. Todd Grande never heard that expression? Knowledge is power? No one is more enslaved than he who believes he is free. So there's a certain empowerment that comes from realizing that people are trying to trick you. Same thing like, let's say, advertising. I mean, this is a really good example. when people are advertising, like, so for tobacco science, for example, the people that saw through the propaganda, the government medical cartels propaganda of pushing forth and promoting certain cigarette companies, they saw through it. There's a certain power that empowers you. You see through the lies and the propaganda, and you don't smoke cigarettes because you realize that there's a conspiracy against you in terms of people trying to make money off your ignorance on the health effects of smoking cigarettes. Same thing with sugar science when that came around. So sugars, there's a certain, it's the opposite of disempowering. It's actually empowering when you realize that certain corrupt individuals are trying to trick you. When you gain that knowledge, now you're empowered because you're not going to allow yourself to be tricked. Again, there are these just fundamental lack of understanding on Dr. Todd Grande's part in regards to pretty much everything about conspiracy theories.
And a feeling of dissatisfaction about their own lives.
So, okay, that is a very, very bizarre straw man and false dichotomy because a lot of people are dissatisfied with their own lives. Now, you could even argue the majority of people are. So how many people are vastly successful? So you have really, really successful conspiracy theorists who make a ton of money. Then you have really, really successful coincidence theorists who make a ton of money. So both groups are satisfied. Now you have a large portion of the population. So a large percentage of there's a larger percentage of the population that are dissatisfied with their life that are coincidence theorists than a percent of the population that are dissatisfied with life that are conspiracy theorists. So this kind of false dichotomy, neither here nor there argument that has nothing to do with anything really. So he's also roping in a hasty generalization there. Yeah, obviously. There are a certain portion of conspiracy theorists that are dissatisfied with their life, just like there's a portion of coincidence theorists that are dissatisfied with their life. I mean, there's a portion of a lot of people that are dissatisfied with their life. It doesn't really have anything to do with anything. So he's going to straw man hard here, and I think I know where he's going next, so let's examine this.
We also see another characteristic that's fairly common, and this is anxiety. And if you think about the nature of conspiracy theories, this really actually makes a lot of sense. I don't know if I've ever heard anybody talk about a conspiracy theory in kind of a neutral way.
Well, he's obviously never listened to the MINDSHOCK podcast. So again, now he's going with this anecdotal logical fallacy where if he studied conspiracy theories for decades, it would be valid. Clearly he doesn't, and he doesn't know a lot of conspiracy theories because all of his impressions and presuppositions are all false. So in the majority of cases. So it's really, really strange that he would go to this fallacy now where regarding anxiety. So again, he's taking this tiny, tiny percentage of kind of the cliche tinfoil hat guy who's freaking out about everything or the performances that Alex Jones puts on or whatnot. And he's kind of roping in with this false dichotomy and hasty generalization logical fallacy that all conspiracy theorists are like this. There's a larger portion of coincidence theorists that are anxious. They're on all these medications because they have utter faith in the medical cartel and the big pharma cartel. They take all of these anti-anxiety, anti-depression medications, more so than conspiracy theorists. So you could argue that there's way more coincidence theorists who have anxiety and who are depressed and dissatisfied than conspiracy theorists. That's a kind of neither here nor there argument, but he actually disproves himself because once again, conspiracy theorists, if they're smoking weed, they're not anxious. They're chill and relaxed. I mean, that's also a stereotype of certain conspiracy theorists too. Like a lot of potheads or conspiracy theorists, they don't care about nothing. There's no anxiety. It's all good, man. It's all good. And then, of course, there's another portion of conspiracy theorists. They don't believe in the big pharma cartel, so they go with the natural healing routes. They do a lot of meditation. So they're not anxious at all. But he pretends none of these individuals exist because he's making a hit piece here, an illogical, dishonest. For the most part, it ends up being dishonest. Even if he truly believes it, it's not an accurate representation. So in general, it's very, very dishonest portrayal.
Or anybody that was like okay with it. So if we use, for example, the shape-shifting alien lizard humanoids.
And of course, he's going for the appeal to extreme logical fallacy. That's why it's his favorite, which he admitted.
Nobody ever assumes they're just here on vacation, or they're here maybe to help us.
Actually, there's a whole bunch of conspiracy theorists who believe that the lizard aliens are our snake brothers, the Brotherhood of the Snake, all of these things, and they actually help mankind. Anunnaki conspiracy theories. I mean, there's I mean, I don't want to say 50-50, but there's a lot of conspiracy theorists who actually think they are here to help us. Then there's another portion of conspiracy theorists who actually do think, I don't know about vacation, but they think there's some kind of neutral watchers. So this is actually getting painful. We're still at the beginning. We're not even quite at the halfway point here. It's getting tough because I guess in his triggered state, he just really, it's nothing but fallacies. It's just fallacies, fallacies, fallacies. It's difficult to continue now because everything he's saying is false, and all he has are his faith in scientism and these logical fallacies to justify his faith here and everything he's saying in what is essentially a hit piece against critical thinkers in an attempt to make the scientism cult look better.
Or maybe they kind of pulled up to our planet in a spaceship and they looked at us and said, well, we feel kind of nervous about fitting in, so we're going to try to look like humans. No one ever assumes the best.
Actually, a lot of people assume that. Like I said, I mean, has he done no research on this topic? This is not a good look, Dr. Todd Grande. There's a whole lot of people who believe that. I mean, we're not even talking about little pockets of minorities. We're talking about a large percentage of conspiracy theorists believe that the aliens are here to help, and then a large portion also believe that they're watching or objective or just observing, and there's a lot of those. Now, are there more that think they're nefarious? Probably. I mean, I haven't done a poll, so I wouldn't speak ignorantly like this guy is. But yeah, there might be more that believe that they're nefarious. But there's just so many. I mean, you could just browse through Facebook groups with tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of members who believe that these aliens are benevolent. I mean, I don't know what this guy is smoking.
Of the lizard people, it's always something that's rooted in anxiety. The lizard people are dangerous. The lizard people are trying to overthrow the government, right? So we look at these characteristics, and then particularly anxiety, and again, it really makes sense when you hear people describe conspiracy theories. They don't have kind of a happy component to them. They're usually, again, about something nefarious.
Well, first of all, that's the definition of a conspiracy theory. It's two or more people engaged in a nefarious plot. I mean, that's the basic definition of a conspiracy. But again, completely false on all counts, because there's plenty of conspiracy theorists who think that the aliens are here to help us. I mean, again, this guy, I don't know. This really has lowered my opinion of him, because within 5 minutes of Googling, I mean, it's rough.
We also see that people who believe in conspiracy theories tend to lack a sense of control, whereas people who do not believe in them tend to have more of a sense of control.
So that's, again, completely false, because sure, there's a certain percentage of both coincidence theorists and conspiracy theorists who have control and don't have control. But again, this is going to be anecdotal, but clearly I've studied conspiracy theories a lot longer than this guy. This guy doesn't even know about the theories that the aliens are here to help us. I mean, it's bizarre. But anyway, the control, actually, there's a lot of conspiracy theorists who have, because of the conspiracy theories, they feel like they're more in control now that they've figured up the jig and they're not being tricked now. Whereas coincidence theorists, they have that false illusion of control, whereas if the government is a good entity, they're controlling everything for everybody's benefit, there's the illusion of safety, security, and control that's not real, and they prefer that illusion. That's why they can't handle the truth that humans are fallible and or corrupt. So this is rough. Man.
So perhaps believing in a CT just leaves somebody feeling that they have more influence on the situation around them. It just gives them, again, a sense of control. Now, when we talk about the formation of the conspiracy theorist, we see that it may actually begin as an individual process in which a person tries to make sense of some event perceived as threatening or disastrous. So really it may start with anxiety as well. So we know that anxiety is a part of it, but it might start that way.
Well, so now we're going with the we know arguments. We know that anxiety is a part of it, but it's not a part of it. I mean, sure, in a certain percentage of cases it could be. If you haven't checked out the MindShock podcast, the we arguments, it specifically addresses the silliness of pretending. We know this, we know that. Different people know different things. And some of those things that you think you know, you don't actually know. For example, like this guy, Dr. Todd Grande is showing himself to be quite the goofball on the topic of conspiracies. Again, that doesn't take away any expertise from the other topics and crimes he has covered, because like I said, I actually like the guy, but it's interesting when the logic switch gets completely turned off. Now, I mean, there's, homeless bums that dropped out of middle school that are more logical than him at this point, based on the points that he's presenting and how he's presenting them. So anxiety has nothing to do with most conspiracy theorists. For anybody that has studied this, it's simply the realization that you've been lied to. And when you're lied to a certain amount of times, it's like a dog that's been beaten. Eventually, even when it meets a nice person, it's going to be cautious. Whereas a dog that's been coddled and cradled its whole life, living in a tiny closet, that's been, again, pampered by loving owners and that's never been beaten, it's going to be overly friendly, even potentially to people that would harm it. That's the difference. It's the safety net illusion. But he did accurately describe the part where conspiracy theorists, critical thinkers, they're basically scientific. So they are looking for explanations. They're not taking things on blind faith, especially with a history of deception that all governments obviously have. That he's completely ignoring historical context, the scientific method that he mentioned at the beginning, that went out the window, I guess. You're supposed to just take things religiously on faith now. And if you don't, all of a sudden you have anxiety.
And it may also start with fear. We also believe that certain people are more vulnerable to go through this individual process.
That's very, very telling. Vulnerable. Now, does he mean more logical? So by saying vulnerable and adding the word fear there, he's actually describing coincidence theorists, because coincidence theorists, they're very mentally weak, so they can't handle it. They're too afraid of the conspiracy theories being true. So this guy, Dr. Todd Grande, could be accurately psychologically projecting why he himself is a coincidence theorist, a scientism cultist, who just takes on religious faith authorities and blindly worships authorities. And he might be accurately psychologically projecting here that that's largely because of fear, because he's too scared, he can't handle that some of these conspiracies could be real. Whereas and he's vulnerable, he's that much more vulnerable. So in terms of conspiracy theorists, I would say, again, people who've studied conspiracy theories, particularly for a long period of time, these are people who aren't vulnerable. These are people that are exhibiting mental strength and being able to see past the status quo, the corrupt profiteers. So they have they've basically been able to rise above the fear and need for that security blanket. So again, if nothing else, this is a good exercise of Dr. Todd Grande's psychological projection and the stacking of logical fallacies to justify faith-based belief systems.
So to look at a situation as disastrous or frightening and kind of develop a conspiracy theory ideation. And what we found is this type of ideation is more prevalent among people who are politically cynical, who have low self-esteem, who are more disagreeable, and I'll talk about that a little more when I get to personality.
Okay, so a lot of conflation there. So politically cynical. Now, is that another way to just say realistic? I mean, has this guy studied zero history? I mean, there's a reason politicians have a certain reputation. I mean, what do you call it when you steal money from people and divvy it up under the guise of taxes? I mean, there's a reason people view politicians as crooks and as liars. I mean, is this guy clueless of all of human history? I mean, part of the scientific method is observation. If you're clearly observing the same traits, and this guy, again, he obviously has logic. I mean, he studied serial killers and a lot of these true crime cases. There are certain patterns that emerge. So he's using the word cynical again in this propagandist way that's pretty dishonest. So if we look at, what's the definition of cynical? Let's go to the dictionary. Let's go to Oxford. Cynical is an adjective, believing that people are motivated purely by self-interest, distrust of human sincerity or integrity, concerned only with one's own interests and typically disregarding accepted standards in order to achieve them. Okay, so what's the difference? Now, here's the false dichotomy and the straw man that he has put up here. It's not a cynic, it's sure political cynicism. So basically, somebody, is it really being, I mean, that's a very disingenuous word to use because it's simply being realistic that corrupt profiteers are corrupt profiteers. I mean, are you cynical for thinking a serial killer might kill you if they've killed a bunch of people? Is that cynicism or is that realism? Okay, the second thing he mentioned is low self-esteem. Again, this complete false dichotomy obfuscation, because again, if we're talking pure numbers, the amount of coincidence theorists with low self-esteem would be a lot more than conspiracy theorists. Furthermore, conspiracy theorists have to have a certain amount of self-esteem and belief in themselves to go against the status quo. I mean, you have to there's a certain amount of bravery, especially, let's look at that. Let's give the flat earthers some credit. I'm not saying they're correct about anything, but they have a good amount of self-esteem. The ones that go public to withstand that ridicule. Coincidence theorists are way too terrified. They would never have the self-esteem required to go public as a flat earther, even if they believe the earth is flat. And obviously, there's a lot of flat earthers who have not gone public because, again, they don't have the self-esteem. So they can't really accept themselves as a conspiracy theorist or a flat earther because they're so terrified that they're not going to fit in with the crowd, the sheep mentality, herd mentality. These are people with low self-esteem, coincidence theorists. They're too terrified to believe anything other than what the mainstream or their peers believe. So you have to have a high self-esteem to basically go against the crowd. Now, this is a mental health professional. And I'm beginning to think more and more that this guy can't be this silly and he's just being dishonest and he knows all these things. Again, I don't know him personally, so I don't know if that's true. I'm not going to pretend to know it's true. But the longer this goes on, I mean, this is a mental health professional who thinks that conspiracy theorists have a low self-esteem. I mean, some of them do, sure, just like a whole lot of coincidence theorists and scientism cultists have low self-esteem. And I would agree, if this is all just projection, it's quite accurate, because if you have low self-esteem, you're going to go with the crowd. You're going to be a scientism cultist. You're going to be more prone to just blindly accepting authority because you don't have that mental strength. You don't have the self-esteem to believe in yourself or view yourself as strong enough to deviate from the crowd. Because truth-seeking, of course, it's very difficult, because can you handle the truth? I did a podcast on that as well. There's a certain amount of belief you have to have in yourself to just say, I'm going to believe wherever the evidence leads to, no matter what it leads to. In David Icke's case, if he's genuine, again, I've gone over whether David Icke is a shill or not. You could check that podcast out. But for the sake of argument, if he's genuine, and if that's where the evidence led him, he had enough self-esteem to say, okay, these reptilian lizard aliens control the world and they shapeshift. He had enough self-esteem to do that. How many people would have enough self-belief in themselves to do that? Very few. So everything this guy is saying is just, there's a fundamental lack of understanding, or it's just pure psychological projection from his coincidence theory, scientism, cultist side of things. And the last point he made there on people who are more disagreeable. So that's almost so again, obviously self-esteem manifests different ways in different people with different personality types. Yes. However, again, this is what he's stacking all these false dichotomies, because some people who are disagreeable have low self-esteem. Some people who are disagreeable have high self-esteem, and they have such a belief in themselves and such a high regard for themselves, they're willing to be disagreeable and contrarian and go against people. So It's really bizarre how he's just stacking all of these fallacies and demonstrably false presuppositions to make his point. I mean, is he really just thinking he's talking to a bunch of morons and that's the majority of his base? Is that what he's thinking? Are the majority of his base so they wouldn't identify these things? That they wouldn't, just crack open the Oxford Dictionary and say, wait a second, nothing he's saying is adding up to these empirically verifiable definitions. So, but the disagreeable, again, he's not technically wrong about that. Obviously, a lot of contrarians are conspiracy theorists because they're simply going to go against the status quo, whatever it is. They're not necessarily going to be logical, objective, scientific minded, and look at the evidence. On MINDSHOCK, obviously, the motto is the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. So yes, the official narrative by the corrupt profiteers, not all of them are going to be 100% false. It could be true. Obviously, that's where burden of proof comes in, but I'll give him a piece of a brownie. He doesn't get a full brownie point. He'll get a tiny little bit of a brownie point for saying contrarians might like being conspiracy theorists, because yes, that is true in a certain percentage of cases.
Who are more disagreeable, and I'll talk about that a little more when I get to personality, and possibly people that have lower crystallized intelligence.
Oh, he went there. The ad hominem. Okay, I was joking. That's not an ad hominem if he's simply pointing out that their crystallized intelligence is lower. Now, he didn't say intelligence. He said crystallized intelligence, which is actually even worse. So, crystallized intelligence specifically means the accumulation of knowledge, facts, or skills that have been acquired, as opposed to, let's say, potential or intellectual ability. Crystallized intelligence is what has already been accumulated in your brain, facts and skills. Now, this is also demonstrably false because, again, this is pure psychological projection at this point. Because conspiracy theorists, if wrong, like, for example, let's say the flat earthers, they have a much higher accumulation of facts, so to speak, about the model they're arguing against in addition to their own model. Now, they obviously commit a lot of logical fallacies as well. I go over them on my flat earth debates, but in general, in any kind of debate, if you take an average conspiracy theorist and an average coincidence theorist, the average conspiracy theorist will have a much higher crystallized intelligence because they'll know all of the alleged facts from the official coincidence theory pushed forth by the corrupt profiteers on the idiot box, which may or may not be true, and they'll also know all the facts of the conspiracy theory, which may or may not be true. So their crystallized intelligence will be a lot higher. Now, you can cherry pick, again, and pick a random coincidence theorist. You can cherry pick and pick a highly specialized coincidence theorist that happens to be correct about a certain conspiracy theory not being true, and demonstrating that in a debate with a conspiracy theorist, critical thinker, skeptic who has a lower crystallized intelligence. You can, of course, find anecdotal and cherry-picked examples. But he's saying, and he did put the word possibly in front of it, but he's making the connotation perfectly clear. And again, fundamental lack of understanding of what a conspiracy theorist is. I mean, a lot of people call Shiva Ayyadurai a conspiracy theorist. I mean, would you say that his crystallized intelligence is lower than, let's say, Fauci? Again, let's compare apples to apples. Or Kary Mullis was considered a conspiracy theorist. He's the Nobel Prize winner for creating the PCR test, which he says cannot be tested for viruses based on cycle rates and extrapolated cycle rates and all of these things that'll find anything in anyone. So this guy, according to Dr. Todd Grande, if we're going apples to apples, because again, on the other end of the spectrum, we can take the goofball living in his mom's basement, who's a crazy conspiracy theorist. He does his research. He spends all these hours, like even for Flat Earth, so he's learned a lot about the heliocentric globe model, more so than his contemporary, than his equal, than his peer. Someone else, let's say if we take two high school dropouts. One of them's a hardcore coincidence theorist, scientism cultist, believes everything they see on the idiot box. One of them is some guy, maybe they have a job at their own apartment. Some guy living in his mom's basement, plays video games, and looks up conspiracy videos on YouTube all day. He's going to have a better understanding of both the official coincidence theory, the narrative pushed forth by the corrupt profiteers, and the conspiracy theory, he might choose to believe the conspiracy theory for logically fallacious reasonings, but this argument of possibly lower crystallized intelligence, demonstrably false. Very, very poor showing from Todd Grande. I actually wanted to do this logical analysis because I thought he would actually have legitimate points just because of how astute he is in his other videos and analyses. But yeah, no, it seems like the CIA really did a number on this guy, and a lot of people with their propagandized term conspiracy theory and conspiracy theorist. Anybody employing critical thinking to question the government narratives.
So again, this is just an association. This doesn't mean that everybody that believes in a conspiracy theory has lower crystallized intelligence.
Or, again, comparatively, it might mean that, again, not everybody who believes in the official coincidence theory, the official narratives, has a lower crystallized intelligence, but en masse, the sheep, the lemmings, they're going to have lower crystallized intelligences than conspiracy theorists on average if you do any kind of research, which clearly this guy has not done. It sounds like he just watched some like snippets of conspiracy theorist segments on mainstream news channels.
Just some research shows that it's more likely in that population as opposed to other populations.
Which other populations? Because certainly not coincidence theorist populations. I mean, oh man, this is going to be a really rough one.
So we see that discrepancies or ambiguities in mainstream explanations for an event may also have a role in shaping CT ideation.
Well, of course. I mean, if you make up stories that are obviously not true, and there's a lot of plot holes, of course critical thinkers are gonna look at that and say, oh look, why would we believe this? I mean, this isn't rocket science.
And once this process has been initiated, we see that confirmation bias at work. So people look at information and only pick out what confirms what they already believe.
Correct. So any scientism cultist or someone working in the mental health field like himself, his confirmation bias is so extreme, he's only going to pick out those things that reaffirm his faith-based belief system. Now, is that also true for hardcore conspiracy theorists? Of course. Now, here's the thing. Does that invalidate anything? So if, let's say, if you're a prison guard in some kind of maximum security area for serial killers, and you get attacked by at least one inmate every single day, and you're on guard, is the confirmation bias when someone looks at you with a crazed look in their eye, you're going to think they're going to attack you, of course. Now, in every single case, are you going to get attacked? No. Now, is that a true bias? I mean, yeah, I guess it is. But that doesn't invalidate that proven liars lie and corrupt profiteers are corrupt profiteers. So, like, he's not really making any kind of legitimate points here.
And also they want to avoid cognitive dissonance, right? So they see the world or the situation as scary.
Wow. Okay, so now we are firmly in 100% psychological projection land because he just accurately described coincidence theorists. Coincidence theorists want to avoid that cognitive dissonance because they know the official narrative is bunk. That's why the Mr. Smith effect comes in. That's why they get emotionally triggered because they know their subconscious recognizes the truth that corrupt profiteers are corrupt profiteers and that humans are fallible and a lot of humans in positions of power are corrupt. The subconscious recognizes the obvious truths, but it makes them uncomfortable.
They see the world or the situation as scary.
So like he said, they see the world as the situation is scary. So coincidence theorists, they don't like to be scared. So they have to pretend that government authorities are legitimate and all of these scientism institutions are legitimate and they really know what they claim to know. And because it's too scary otherwise. Because, for example, if the theory of relativity is not true, it's so scary that we don't really know what's going on in the universe. Or that, let's say, Louis Pasteur's germ theory isn't true. And viruses don't work the way that these scientism priests allege. And perhaps Antoine Béchamp was correct with cellular theory or terrain theory. And that's kind of scary because so many experts don't know that. So we're operating with such limited knowledge, which is always the case, but that's scary. So for coincidence theorists, that whole idea is so scary, and they want to avoid the cognitive dissonance of anything that doesn't line up to their faith in scientism. So they're going to pretend that the conspiracy theorists are the crazy ones who can recognize the fallibility and corruption because they're in this state of fear and anxiety. Again, if we look, this is an excellent example of psychological projection by Dr. Todd Grande. So this is valuable for that reason, if nothing else.
And the conspiracy theory is scary, so they want to keep those two things in a balance. So this just ends up starting this cycle where they drive further and further into this belief system toward a conspiracy theory.
And he just described the same thing for scientism cultists, because you become indoctrinated at these indoctrination facilities from kindergarten onward. So as you rise through the ranks, it just reaffirms that scientism cult religious belief system. Now, to his point, it is a fair point. When you recognize that liars lie and then they just keep lying, that's going to reaffirm the belief system that liars lie. So he's right about that part, but in terms of how it all ties in together, he's just projecting.
Furthermore, if somebody already has a tendency to distrust science, that only kind of magnifies this process.
And here's how we know this guy is totally clueless about conspiracy theories, because nobody distrusts science, they distrust scientism. And the fact that he doesn't illustrate the differences prove that either he's just really that bereft of logic and reason in this department, and he's just completely ignorant of, because if he's that thoroughly indoctrinated in his religion of scientism that he doesn't even see that it's religion, there's really no hope there. There's no hope there. So he's the wrong person to be discussing this. There are plenty of scientists out there who understand the differences between scientism and science, and the objective scientific method, and the fact that priests and lab coats do not have the monopoly on truth or the scientific method or logic or reason or even basic common sense. So that he's, again, pretending and strawmanning that conspiracy theorists, actually most conspiracy theorists love science more than coincidence theorists. But there's no love lost for scientism or the corrupt profiteers pretending their religion of scientism is science. And this fundamental lack of understanding is what is the real problem here with this guy's presentation. And I really hope he does a rebuttal video, because I would like to see him address each of these points if his cognitive dissonance and his fear does not prevent him from doing so.
And distrusting science, this can be fueled by personal encounters with PhDs, mental health and medical professionals, lawyers.
He means authorities? Because so the distrust is in the authorities, not in the scientific method or the actual real science. The politicized, corrupt studies and belief systems, those are what there is a distrust for, because they're actually being scientific. Distrust of humans is scientific. I think this will be a good time to read an excerpt here from Richard Feynman. Learn from science that you must doubt the experts. As a matter of fact, I can also define science another way. Science is the belief in the ignorance of experts. When someone says science teaches such and such, he is using the word incorrectly. Science doesn't teach it. Experience teaches it. If they say to you, science has shown such and such, you might ask, how does science show it? How did the scientists find out how, what, where? Not science has shown, but this experiment, this effect has shown. And you have as much right as anyone else upon hearing about the experiments, but we must listen to all the evidence to judge whether a reusable conclusion has been arrived at. So Feynman's definition of science is the exact opposite of Todd Grande, who is using it in a scientism fashion. So according to Feynman, science is the belief in the ignorance of the experts, and as he is calling this, the distrust of authorities. That's actually what real science is. And this was from Richard Feynman's speech, What is Science?, at the 15th annual meeting of the National Science Teachers Association in 1966. So it's really important to have the correct definitions, because otherwise you just end up psychologically projecting and pretending the side you're doing a hit piece on is committing these acts when it is in fact the side of the coincidence theorist and the scientism cultists who are anti-science.
Other people who are in positions of authority. So if somebody has a bad experience with somebody in one of those groups, that may tend to move them a little bit closer to believing in CT ideation.
So isn't this just basic common sense? Like, if a serial killer is always killing people, and you think they're going to kill someone again, isn't that just common sense to believe that? He's calling these like tendencies, ideations, and all of these things. This is called common sense. I mean, it's really the level of silliness. I mean, this is getting near Joe Rogan level of silliness now.
Now, the strongest predictor of whether or not an individual will ultimately accept a conspiracy theory is actually the presence of an earlier conspiracy theory. So that's still our best predictor. If somebody believes in one, they're quite likely to believe in others.
Presence of an earlier conspiracy theory? Now, what, again, is he just talking common sense here? Because is he just basically saying if someone has a tendency to lie about everything all the time, and if they lie again, or if they say something, a critical thinker, someone with common sense, might assume that they're lying again because they've lied so many times? I mean, he's really not making any logical points here. He's stating the bleeding obvious in regards to why would you believe a group of people or institutions that are constantly mistaken and or lying and just magically think they're not going to be? Of course! This is called experience. This is actually utilizing science. If the experiments are always giving the same result, perhaps they are valid. Perhaps a particular theory is valid if it keeps working out the way that it was theorized and controls are accounted for. Of course, the control is very important.
So that's still our best predictor. If somebody believes in one, they're quite likely to believe in others.
And see, this is also demonstrably false, black and white logical fallacy, strawman logical fallacy. You actually see it more with coincidence theorists. Because there's a lot of coincidence theorists, if they don't believe in, let's say, mid-range conspiracies, they're never going to believe in any more advanced or, in their own minds, outlandish conspiracy theories. Whereas there's plenty of conspiracy theorists who they won't even touch flat Earth. They won't even touch lizard shapeshifters or celebrity cloning programs. But they definitely don't think JFK was taken out by a lone gunman. So there's such a wide range. His black and white fallacy, I mean, this is perhaps the most ad nauseum use of black and white fallacies I've ever seen to stack on top of. Because, I mean, he's stacking all these other fallacies, but it's mostly coming from his fundamental lack of understanding of what a conspiracy theory even is and what a conspiracy theorist is. I mean, I boiled this down into such simple terms. A conspiracy theorist simply believes in human fallibility and or corruption. That's it. That's really all it comes down to. Now, you have to tackle things individually. If you're going to be logical or scientifically, you're not just going to have all of these hasty generalization logical fallacies and put everything under one umbrella. I mean, what kind of silly nonsense is that? You're going to examine each individual theory on its own merit. That's what being scientific is.
And this really goes against a lot of the thinking you see that's kind of promoted around conspiracy theories. This idea that somebody says, no, this one conspiracy theory, I believe this is true, but I don't believe that any of the others are true, right? Which in a way kind of adds credibility because they're saying, no, it's just this one. I have evidence to support this one, and I don't believe in the rest of them.
How would that add credibility? That would actually subtract credibility because condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance. So if they haven't even looked into, I mean, again, you can hide behind appeal to incredulity all you want with these lizard people, but the truth is, if you're gonna claim to be truly scientific, you have to be objective and neutral. Because for the sake of argument, I'm not saying it's true, but let's say the lizard conspiracy is true. You would never know if you don't actually investigate it. So being scientific means you're actually after the truth of your reality. So you would look at the evidence, and if the evidence meets that burden of proof to show that the alien lizard conspiracy theory is true, you would have to accept it if the evidence is there. Again, I'm not saying it's there, but if it were there, refusing to look at it or pretending that no conspiracies are true, except for this one conspiracy, how does that gain credibility? Maybe in a mind bereft of logic and reason. Maybe for a clueless coincidence theorist and scientism cultist, perhaps that would gain credibility. He really betrays himself here.
But what happens in reality is someone who believes in one is much more likely to believe in many.
And that's true. If you realize that humans are fallible, you're not going to magically think they're only fallible in one area. For example, if you understand that politicians are fallible, you're probably also going to understand that police officers are fallible, doctors are fallible, that people in different groups of people in different professions are fallible. So it's not so much, again, he's always conflating all these things and creating all these black and white fallacies. It's not so much that you believe it happened. It's more that you believe that it's possible. For example, if tobacco companies conspire with the government, it's possible that the sugar industry would also do that. Now, you have to have the evidence, of course, but you are more likely to believe it, yes, than a clueless scientism cultist who just bootlicks authority at every turn. They're never going to believe in any nefarious action. So that's where the projection comes in, because if they don't believe that humans are fallible and or corrupt, then how are you going to get them to examine all these different conspiracies? They're not going to believe in any of them because they have this blind faith in their authorities. They're very religious, like this Dr. Todd Grande guy.
Now, eventually, social dynamics do play a role. So as I mentioned, it's an individual process, but then group and social dynamics kind of take over.
Now, another good point with his projection, that social dynamics is very, very important because, again, herd mentality. Coincidence theorists are coincidence theorists not just because of the heavy indoctrination by the corrupt profiteers on the idiot box, but because a lot of their peers also bought into it, so it makes them feel less silly. Because if everybody believes them, how stupid can they be? Because if they just keep appealing to popularity, that makes them seem less silly, and it's very comforting.
And reinforce embedding the CT. So I don't think it's so much that conspiracy theorists really market and reach out to other people and try to recruit them. I think this individual process starts, and then somebody's looking for a group to merge with.
Okay, he's made the first point. So we had to go, we're halfway, almost about halfway done here for him to make the first legitimate point. That truth seekers aren't, there's a limited amount of recruitment for disrupting the belief in corrupt authorities. You have to actually be open-minded and logical and objective enough and a certain amount of mental strength to go looking for truth. So he does have a point there.
And of course, they're very easy to find with the internet. All these different conspiracy theory groups are quite accessible. So if you have this belief or this tendency to believe in CTs, you can find reinforcement for that in a social group very easily.
True, but not as easily as coincidence theorists, because the reinforcement and indoctrination is on all over the mainstream, all the news channels, TV shows, all over Hollywood, all over the main newspapers. It's everywhere. So you have that reinforcement. It's much easier to be a coincidence theorist than a conspiracy theorist. So it's not that his points aren't valid. It's just he's so heavily biased. He's just so biased he doesn't see how these points actually prove the silliness of coincidence theorists and coincidence theorist mentality using these properties and variables that he's identified, even more so for coincidence theory.
Now this is a good time to point out that I put the references for the articles that I use in the description of my videos, and I have a reference in there from an article that actually shows that people that believe in real-world conspiracy theories, so the ones where there are groups of people that believe in them, are actually more likely to believe in fictitious CTs as well.
So, wow, there's so much wrong with that statement, and that probably highlights this entire video that he did, because all of these faith-based presuppositions and circular reasoning fallacies that are used as the basis for these articles and this so-called research, where they kind of cherry pick these examples of conspiracy theorists that are on the fringe in an attempt to discredit all critical thinkers, conspiracy theorists, the majority of which are, of course, not on these fringes, believing in every single conspiracy theory video they see on YouTube. But that's an interesting point there. The other thing that scientism cultists like Dr. Todd Grande don't understand, who funded that research? Who funded that article? So that's another thing that separates critical thinkers, conspiracy theorists from scientism cultists and authority worshippers. They understand how conflict of interest works, and Dr. Todd Grande does not. So conflict of interest is, of course, something, it's very basic, it's a basic concept, but when people are triggered, it just, again, shuts off all logic and reason. Because obviously authorities, so-called people in positions of power, they want to maintain that power. So they're going to have these power structures and institutions in place to reinforce this propaganda against critical thinking, conspiracy theory. So they're going to come out with all this research. So again, Todd Grande doesn't realize how much he's proving points against himself by the arguments that he uses.
So in this experiment, they created a conspiracy theory that had no basis in anything. No one believed it. It was completely made up. And people who believed in real-world CTs, again, were more likely to believe in one that was completely made up.
Again, a neither here nor there argument, because if you believe humans are fallible and corrupt, if you make up a story or a theory involving fallible or corrupt humans, of course, critical thinkers who understand that humans are fallible and or corrupt, they would be more likely to believe a fictitious one that wasn't true because of basic human psychology, because humans are fallible and or corrupt. Whereas a completely indoctrinated, brain-dead coincidence theorist, they're going to disbelieve that humans are fallible and or corrupt no matter what, because that's what they were indoctrinated into. So no matter how much evidence you show them, they will still disbelieve. Again, Dr. Todd Grande doesn't realize how much he's proving points against himself using these arguments. It's amusing in that way as well.
So there's a real tendency to add more and more CTs once you already believe in one, like I indicated before. So what about the logic? What's the logical processing as somebody kind of moves towards CT ideation? Well, the consensus among those who aren't CTs is that conspiracy theorists are bad scientists, that these individuals are not interested in falsification, but instead selectively seek evidence to confirm their beliefs. Again, this is the confirmation bias.
And if that's not the projection of the century, I don't know what is, because that is the staple of coincidence theorists and scientism worshipping cultists.
So they indiscriminately accept any argument that points to the conspiracy.
And that's demonstrably false as well. So this kind of extreme straw manning it's very damaging, because he's talking about logic when he seems to be very clueless in this sphere, so to speak, of conspiracy theory, science versus scientism. Again, his other videos regarding true crime cases and serial killers, they are quite informed. But again, he's able to utilize logic and reason there. Here, he's not. So he's going to be sillier than a 4-year-old goofball here, because his logic has been shut off, because he's so triggered, even though he has excellent presentation control. So you can't really tell he's triggered, because he's a very calm guy. Again, he does have a certain level of competency in general, just not in this topic. And that's what's so fascinating, again, about conspiracy theories versus coincidence theories, and analyzing logic, science versus scientism, and the whole scope of human psychology on how all these things intertwine. It's quite fascinating. I mean, that's why I cover it so much on MINDSHOCK. It's not about who's right or wrong or which theory is true or not true, just the psychology behind all of it and the ability to utilize logic and reason objectively. It's quite curious, quite curious. But if this isn't the projection of the century and the straw man of the century, because conspiracy theorists actually do the opposite. If he did any real research, if he just, these cherry-picked examples of these contrarian psychopaths who just believe any YouTube video, yeah, that is a very, very tiny minority of the whole group of people known as critical thinkers, aka conspiracy theorists. They are in the group. They are. but it's just a vast minority. The majority of conspiracy theorists, for example, when I look at anything, I don't believe or disbelieve. I look at the burden of proof. So we can, even if we tear apart the official coincidence theory, the official narrative by the corrupt profiteers, that doesn't mean I would go to a conspiracy theory. Now, I also realize I am not a standard conspiracy theorist. So just if I don't believe that jet fuel magically burned down fireproof steel and it's completely incinerated fireproof steel and just completely incinerated these gigantic skyscrapers, but somehow magically left paper passports unscathed, that doesn't mean I believe in a conspiracy theory. So again, all these false dichotomies, that doesn't mean I believe that, for example, aliens did it or George Bush did it. That just means I recognize the problem with the official coincidence theory. The official narrative doesn't appear to be true. That doesn't mean I know which narrative is true. That doesn't mean I would jump to any of those conclusions. And a lot of, again, I'm not going to talk majority or minority. A decent percentage of conspiracy theorists, you need a lot to convince them, especially if they've been in the conspiracy sphere for a long time. They know all the BS out there. Like with alien abductions, there's a lot, and UFOs, there's a lot of fakery. How many, you really do have to struggle to find the conspiracy theorists who don't believe there's fakery. So of course, Dr. Todd Grande here, he's pretending through all these fallacies and this dishonesty that all conspiracy theorists are like that. Obviously, that's not the case. Obviously, that's not the actual process by which all of this occurs.
So this really forms kind of a self-sealing quality. They're resistant, if not invulnerable, to contrary evidence.
Again, a staple of scientism, cultist, and coincidence theorists.
And actually, the contrary evidence can make the belief in the CT stronger. The evidence against a conspiracy theory is often ultimately seen by its adherents as evidence in favor of the conspiracy.
And that's, again, pure psychological projection, because that's exactly how coincidence theorists and scientism cultists operate. I mean, sure, a vast minority of conspiracy theorists operate like that as well, but the overwhelming majority of coincidence theorists and scientism cultists operate the way he just projected.
So ultimately, they defeat really any attempt at testing. And this is referred to as a paradox of evidence that renders conspiracy theories as unfalsifiable. So nothing can change their minds.
All demonstrably false. So a lot of conspiracy theorists, again, I'm not going to get into minority, majority, but a large percentage, the intelligent ones, the critical thinkers, not only would they accept evidence, but they actually outline what needs to be presented to prove the conspiracy false and the coincidence theory correct. So they go beyond that. And I do that as well. Like, if this is true, then you need to be able to prove this, this, and this. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. For example, if people want to believe the moon landing was real, you don't lose thousands of reels of the telemetry data. You have to have the telemetry data. Now, that doesn't mean the telemetry data wouldn't be faked, but one step at a time. You need to have all these things. When you need to have video footage that doesn't look fake, you need to have explanations that account for all these things. And again, they might have went to the moon and the video could be fake. I mean, there's all these alternative scenarios. He's talking about this minor group of conspiracy theorists who are not logical, a vast minority who simply default to conspiracy every time and who will not accept evidence to the contrary. A lot of them won't even accept additional evidence to the conspiracy theory, because once they believe something, they're just closed off from developing anything further. So I've even seen conspiracy theorists who refuse to listen to evidence that would bolster their own argument. So there are all kinds, but using these anecdotal logical fallacies and these black and white logical fallacies, these compositional logical fallacies, that just makes Dr. Todd Grande look like a complete goofball, particularly when he's exactly describing coincidence theorists and scientism cultists.
And of course, this is highly inconsistent with the scientific method, which promotes flexible thinking. So with the scientific method, you may believe in something, but if you see evidence to the contrary, especially if it's repeated.
Exactly. So so a lot of conspiracy theorists go by the scientific method, whereas the vast majority of coincidence theorists and scientism cultists, if not the absolute majority, they do not go by the scientific method and evidence.
But if you see evidence to the contrary, especially if it's repeated and you weigh that evidence and it seems to be substantial, then in theory you would change your mind to a new way of thinking.
So he just completely described conspiracy theorists, because conspiracy theorists were all once coincidence theorists. We went through the same indoctrination. If you went to public school in a first world country or even other countries, you go through the same indoctrination. So again, this is the silliness of coincidence theorists and scientism cultists. They pretend that these conspiracy theorists weren't once coincidence theorists. All conspiracy theorists are former coincidence theorists who had the mental strength to realize that they had been fooled. Again, I will reiterate Mark Twain. It's easier to fool people than convince them they've been fooled. So you have to have a certain amount of mental strength to realize you've been fooled and to evolve from that by actually being scientific and defaulting to the scientific method with controls using objective logic and reason. Now, because of his Dunning-Kruger and his ego, he can't re-examine all of that for himself, so he has to pretend and hallucinate and strawman that this was not the case for how conspiracy theorists became conspiracy theorists. Conspiracy theorists all believed the official theory, then once they saw the evidence against it, they had to change their mind. They had to have the mental strength to change their mind and go with a different theory that had more evidence supporting it. Maybe also not true, but more evidence than the theory put forth by the corrupt profiteers on the idiot box.
Right, so we adjust based on the evidence. With conspiracy theories, we just don't see that adjustment.
Well, it already happened. So he's arbitrarily picking a point after and pretending it didn't happen in order to justify his own faith-based belief system in scientism and the corrupt profiteers and these corrupt authorities. So he has to strawman, pretend, and hallucinate that conspiracy theorists didn't go through this process.
We don't see people kind of moving in a direction away from the conspiracy theory. They only move into a firmer belief of that theory, and again, add theories on top of it.
Right, and if he wasn't so blinded with these circular reasoning logical fallacies and these faith-based presupposition that the mainstream coincidence theory pushed forth by the corrupt profiteers was the correct one and the conspiracy theory was the false one, he would see that this is the direction it happens, because it's like moving towards truth. It's eliminating things you know aren't true, and you're moving towards things that are more likely to be true. Why would you move back if you've already looked at all the evidence available, unless there's new evidence? Like, for example, if all of a sudden they found the telemetry data reels, all of a sudden they found all this additional footage that was never released, and they somehow that showed, let's say, more of the journey from the Earth to the moon and back, and they actually had that uncut video footage, and it was they had a couple different angles, all of a sudden we'd have to re-examine and say, wait a second, maybe they really did go to the moon on that first mission when they said they did, and the footage is actually real, or they admit that this X amount of footage is fake with all the wires and fakery, and now they found this other footage that was real and it actually is real. That would go a long way to convincing a lot of people. Now, sure, there is that dug-in minority that won't believe no matter what, because now they've made it their identity. But again, this is even more prevalent in coincidence theory and the cult of scientism and authority worship.
Now, what's interesting, of course, is many people who believe in conspiracy theories will say that they appreciate logic. But yet, when we look at the evidence, we see that a number of people that believe in these theories simultaneously hold contradictory conspiracy theories. Okay,
so now, he's taking a vast minority, because most don't. So yeah, he can find some anecdotes of people that do. Of course, there's silly, illogical, crazy goofballs that are conspiracy theorists. I mean, there's a lot more that are coincidence theorists. I mean, that's the vast majority of the coincidence theorists and the scientism cultists. So regarding logic utilization, again, he can find that bottom, the lowest common denominator of conspiracy theorists and pretend that applies to all conspiracy theorists. I mean, this is an excellent video in nothing but fallacies. I mean, this might be my new go-to, even more than the Joe Rogan podcast, where of course he's fallacy after fallacy, but this guy, he doesn't even sprinkle in any humor. It's just all fallacy all the time. I mean, this could be taught in school. This could be taught, if indoctrination facilities were legitimate, they could teach this in school on developing logic to not fall for all these logical fallacies, because Dr. Todd Grande has brought nothing but logical fallacies to the table. And if we examine his beliefs in the official narratives and coincidence theories, he will realize how he just psychologically projected, because there's no logic to support his belief there. It's all faith and fallacy.
So it becomes kind of a tricky area to align CTs with logic.
So how about it's a tricky area to align coincidence theories with logic, right?
So how about the personality of people who believe in CTs?
Actually, right before we get into the personalities, just regarding how tricky it is, notice he didn't cite a single specific example. And you will notice with people who either don't know what they're talking about or their fundamentals are all wrong, they can't provide specifics to back up their faith-based presuppositions or their religious dogmas. Now, some of them can, but a vast majority cannot. And notice how he did not cite even a single conflicting conspiracy theory. Obviously, they're there. He's not wrong about that. But he didn't give any examples in the logic department.
This is actually fairly straightforward. If we look at the 5-factor model of personality theory, openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, I remember this through the acronym OCEAN, we see that people who believe in conspiracy theories tend to be low in agreeableness and high in openness to experience.
Again, everybody's different, and you can find coincidence theorists and conspiracy theorists that match all of this. So this is just more examples of how Dr. Todd Grande does not or can't apply the scientific method with controls to this topic. He's just unable to do so.
So they do tend to have intellectual curiosity, which of course is actually weakly correlated with intelligence. So I mentioned before that there's some other evidence that indicates an association with low crystallized intelligence, but here we have evidence that there's actually intellectual curiosity.
It's almost like you need controls. It's almost like there's different types of people in different groups.
So again, we just can't look at somebody who believes in a conspiracy theory and automatically think that we know what their level of intellectual functioning is. Everybody's different.
Oh, wow. Now he gets a full brownie point. Everyone is different. Correct. Obviously, there are certain things that have nothing to do whether someone is a conspiracy theorist, critical thinker, or a coincidence theorist, scientism cultist who is actually anti-science.
Now, with this openness to experience piece, we also see high imagination and an appreciation for novel ideas. And really, all of these characteristics make sense in light of what we know about conspiracy theories.
Exactly. Non-dogmatic, non-religious, faith-based thinking, where you just take on blind faith as gospel, whatever you saw in the idiot box, whatever was peddled by an official source, aka critical thinking.
So what about self-perception? How do people who believe in conspiracy theories view themselves? What do we see in the research literature?
Now, if everybody is different, what's the point of even going down this? Because you have all different types of conspiracy theorists viewing themselves as all different types of ways, deluded or not, same as with coincidence theorists.
Well, we see there are some shared assumptions among respondents in these types of studies that look at conspiracy theory beliefs. And we see a lot of different descriptors that they use for themselves, like skeptical by nature, daring to think differently.
Well, skeptical by nature, that's just scientific. Science is skeptical. You're just not taking things on religious faith.
Thinking outside the box, motivated by skepticism and critiquing every form of dogmatic thinking, which I find particularly interesting because really conspiracy theories align very closely with dogmatic thinking.
Wait, what? Again, this is a fundamental lack of understanding, because you can go to the opposite ends of the spectrum. So let's say, again, I'll give some examples here. If you're studying arithmetic and you don't know what the numbers add up to, eventually you find out that 5 plus 5 is 10. And let's say the rest of the world hasn't figured that out yet. So they're maintaining on the idiot box that 5 plus 5 is -3. Now, if you've spent so much time concluding that 5 plus 5 always equals 10, I mean, you use every object imaginable And no matter which objects you use, if you take 5 of them and another 5 of them, there'll always be 10 of them. Then you start mixing the objects. So you have different types of objects. You have 5 different types, 2 of this one, 3 of that one, and then you combine it with another 4 and 1 of different types of objects, and it always ends up with 10 total objects. At a certain point, you might become dogmatic about it, because especially if the points being presented by everyone else are points you already went over and debunked. So if they're attempting to debunk your 5 plus 5 is 10, and those attempted debunkings, you've already gone through all of them a million times just to double check, triple check, quadruple check yourself to make sure you were correct. At a certain point, you might become dogmatic about 5 plus 5 being 10. Now, that's true. And of course, there are people who've become dogmatic to the point where they will not examine new evidence. And then there's other people who are dogmatic, but if you present something new that they haven't already gone over a million times, they will consider it. Now, the projection here is with coincidence theorists and scientism cultists, they're the ones that are truly dogmatic and will not look at anything not matching the dogma. Now he starts projecting his scientism again here, but again, demonstrably false, because he hasn't looked at the totality of the journey of the conspiracy theorist, because they were once the coincidence theorist and scientism cultist as well. And they went through the evidence. They already went through these scientific processes that he's pretending they didn't go through. Again, we're talking about a large percentage here. I'm not going to go into the tiny minority of conspiracy theorists who he might be accurately describing, but even they differ from themselves because, again, as he stated earlier, people are different. So, yeah, this is turning out to be a rough one, but a very good logical exercise and a very good exercise in projection.
But in general, they look at themselves as skeptical and having good critical thinking skills. And they tend to look at modern science and say that modern science is dogmatic.
Which it is.
So what we really see here is that conspiracy theorists, some of them, kind of paint this picture of a war between philosophy and science.
So this is the first time, now he's starting to speak accurately, some of them. Okay, so now we're getting a little bit more accurate. A little bit. It took us, we're almost 3/4 of the way through here. We're getting close to the end. Some of them, yeah, sure. And then again, let me reiterate Feynman's quote, "Science is the belief in the ignorance of experts." So simply understanding human fallibility, that's the war, because again, this religion of scientism and its rise in the past century, as he's talking about modern science is scientism. So it would be apt for someone who's a true logical scientific individual to recognize the corruption and politicization of so-called science, which is basically scientism masquerading as real science. But because of his circular reasoning, he can't even, and his faith-based presuppositions, his religious indoctrination to scientism is so strong, he can't even consider that. And then his ego is so out of control, he can't re-examine those base layers of the house of cards of his belief system.
Even though, of course, science is a type of philosophy. And I've heard this argument a few times, this idea that all scientists are scientific materialists, meaning all scientists must believe that all truth can be found by studying the natural world, and therefore they have an agenda, they're not neutral, not fair, and not unbiased.
So again, demonstrably false, hasty generalization, logical fallacies, strawman logical fallacies, and what he also fails to realize is a lot of conspiracy theorists, they appeal to authority as well. The only reason they were convinced in certain conspiracy theories was because of these experts, these scientists, these high-ranking individuals, again, like Shiva Ayyadurai, in regarding the vaccine debate. Conspiracy theorists are not going to be convinced by some goofball in their mom's basement making YouTube videos. They watch people like Carrie Mullis, Shiva Ayyadurai, all these doctors who have practiced medicine for so many years and saw all this corruption, and they believed their stories of the corruption. Now, they've also corroborated that. There's all these cases. I mean, it's been exposed, the CDC corruption in relation to vaccines and cover-ups of studies showing the detrimental effects of vaccines, the, again, empirically verifiable VAERS database, the 1986 Vaccine Act. So with a lot of these conspiracies, even the alien conspiracies, this all started with government officials giving their stories about seeing UFOs or whatnot. So this idea that, again, Todd Grande just so grandiosely misinformed and ignorant of what conspiracy theory even is or why conspiracy theorists became conspiracy theorists, he really shouldn't have made a video on this topic because it's just so embarrassing. I'm embarrassed for him because he's just completely clueless on this subject, and just about everything he's saying is completely demonstrably false, and he's just projecting the side of scientism while not even understanding the basis of why conspiracy theorists are conspiracy theorists, aka critical thinkers.
But of course we know that many scientists are very philosophical and theological. So this idea that all scientists are scientific materialists just isn't correct.
It's not, and conspiracy theorists don't believe that. So again, all this straw manning nonsense.
Now, people that believe in conspiracy theories also tend to believe that scientists are paid by big corporations, and that's another reason they wouldn't be neutral. And they tend to believe that scientific facts are not so much discovered as constructed. And this knowledge production is related to political power and economic interests.
So everything he just said is 100% true and empirically verifiable. So let's see whether he denies all that or pretends it's nonsense or whatnot.
So there's a lot of distrust of scientists and other people that work to produce knowledge through the scientific method.
Okay, so again, was it really through the scientific method though? So there he again bolsters demonstrating he doesn't understand the difference between scientism and actual science where the scientific method was followed. So he also seems to have a fundamental lack of understanding about the phrase follow the money. Who's funding these studies? Does he think all scientists volunteer for free? I don't understand how he could be this clueless about how studies are funded. And this clueless in historical context as well. Tobacco science, sugar science, and as we're starting to see with so-called vaccine science, he doesn't understand just the fundamentals historically on governments and corporations and the academic industrial complex. I mean, he's just this clueless. It just speaks to his mental weakness or his Dunning-Kruger and ego manipulating to him to such an extent that he cannot do the objective research to find this out. Let's see what he said.
Part of the self-perception, too, appears to come from kind of maybe even a personal dislike of people in positions of authority, and I kind of mentioned this before. A lot of people who believe in CTs view experts as having an authoritative position in society.
All right, is he saying they don't have an authoritative position? I'm not understanding this guy's argument. He comes off so completely clueless here. I really don't know what to make of it. But basically, he's saying not everyone has Stockholm Syndrome. So he's saying that the so-called rulers, oppressors, experts, not everybody will have Stockholm Syndrome and worship their oppressors, those subjugating them, those talking down to them, those being condescending to them, which is true. Conspiracy theorists are critical thinkers. They're not authority worshippers.
It's not deserved. So they believe that essentially scientists disregard alternative sources of knowledge to keep like a monopoly on the truth.
Except for the dissenters, who are actually the scientists who are responsible for a large percentage of conspiracy theorists becoming conspiracy theorists. Again, fundamental lack of even basic knowledge of the history of conspiracy theory and conspiracy theorists. This is the wrong guy to be doing this type of video. Unless you want to learn about logical fallacies, then perfect video. He did a great job with fallacies.
And conspiracy theorists often feel like when they try to explain their point of view, scientists and other experts exclude them, mock them, and stigmatize them. So when they propose an alternative way of looking at the world, scientists kind of turn their back, or worse. So I think that also plays into the way that conspiracy theorists tend to look at themselves in terms of how they relate to the scientific community, at least. Now, what I find interesting about this is that conspiracy theorists aren't really adding philosophical beliefs to science, which is kind of how some of them make it seem. Like they're taking science, which they say is dogmatic, and not really looking for all sources of knowledge.
Again, fundamental lack of understanding between science and scientism, and then just continuing that black and white logical fallacy stack and completely ignoring, again, his cognitive biases, completely ignoring the scientific experts that are responsible for a lot of these main conspiracy theories. And people in positions of authority, military personnel, etc., depending on which conspiracy theory you're talking about.
And they're adding philosophy onto it. Like they're weaving philosophy and science together. But that's not really what they're doing. Really what they're doing is they're dismissing scientific findings.
Again, there's a big difference between scientismic so-called fundings, we should say not findings, fundings, and actual legitimate scientific findings, which they've already factored in. Again, if he's asserting that 5 plus 5 is -3, and the conspiracy theorist has realized that it's 10, again, just for the sake of argument, I'm not presenting this, this is just for the sake of argument, to understand how fallacious this man is being, and how silly. If they've already gone through all the available evidence and realized that 5 plus 5 is 10, now they're going to reject the evidence they've already gone through because they've already gone through it and realized it didn't add up. So again, his Dunning-Kruger and his ego will force him not to even consider that possibility and pretend they just simply dismiss, which is his own projection from the side of coincidence theory and the scientism cult.
So they're looking at something scientific and simply saying, that's not true. Not synthesizing it with philosophy. And also I find it interesting that they often insert results from their own experiments, which of course may or may not follow the scientific method.
Again, the projection there. The so-called scientific findings that he's talking about, he's pretending they all follow the scientific method, while anybody doing an amateur experiment, they may or may not follow. So he's, again, in this cult of authority worship and scientism, these scientism priests, they can't be wrong. So he's assuming that the scientific method is followed, but any kind of person not part of the cult or criticizing the cult, their experiment might be fallible, whereas the scientism priest is not. I mean, he's really proving the case against himself. I don't even really have to say anything anymore.
But they conduct their own experiments that look scientific, at least.
Again, they look scientific. Again, why is he cherry picking here? Sure, there are some that are not scientific. There are some that are. That's a neither here nor there point, which is just, it's almost like he's descended into this strange form of demagogue where he's just talking nonsense for the sake of this hit piece.
And they believe those findings, but not the ones that really truly used the scientific method.
Truly used? What does that mean? Is that his own bias there? So the scientific priests, their findings should be used, but they have the monopoly on real science. So anybody doing a scientific experiment in their backyard, no matter what, their experiment should not be used. So again, the psychological projection, he dead on nailed coincidence theorists and scientism cultists, because they will reject any experiments that don't come to the same conclusion as their own dogmatic beliefs while pretending they're not dogmatic.
So we see a number of inconsistencies with the kind of ideology of conspiracy theorists.
Well, again, pure projection there. Inconsistency in the ideology of coincidence theorists.
But again, all beliefs fall on a continuum, and some people who believe in conspiracy theories really line up with the population fairly well. They're really not that much different. And others, of course, are more extreme.
Just like coincidence theorists. Again, neither here nor there argument.
So we just can't take all conspiracy theorists and put them in the same category and say they all believe this or that.
Which exactly what this goofball has been doing for this whole video. This is how he should have started the video. So clearly this demonstrates that he's really, really triggered. Perhaps he is being honest and he's just this silly and goofy when he becomes triggered. Because he just spent this entire video saying that conspiracy theorists are ABC, XYZ. Now at the end of the video he says not all of them are. Yeah, obviously.
There are a lot of individual differences between conspiracy theorists. So there's a summary on some different factors of conspiracy theorists. And this is, in this video at least, where the scientific portion is going to end, essentially.
Wait, when did it start? All he did was preach his scientism.
So if you really just wanted to see our scientific understanding, I've kind of explained that.
He's explained nothing other than his misunderstanding of what conspiracy theory is, how conspiracy theorists become conspiracy theorists, and he just stacked all these logical fallacies and then psychologically projected the ideology of coincidence theory and scientism cultism.
And now I'll talk a little bit about the alien lizard humanoids and why they're kind of my favorite conspiracy theory, or one reason they might be. So this story goes all the way back to 1981. I was 9 years old, and there was a television show that was on called Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. So this was an actor, Gil Gerard, I think was Buck Rogers, and in season 2 there was this episode, and I saw it the night it premiered, called Mark of the Saurian. And in Buck Rogers, the Saurians were a race of lizard people. And in this particular episode, there's actually a lot of twists and turns in this episode, but essentially what happened is Buck Rogers got this fever that he wasn't immune to because, of course, he was born 500 years earlier. So he wasn't immune to this particular fever, and he got it on board the ship. And at the same time, these ambassadors, diplomats, were visiting the ship, and they appeared human, but they were actually saurians. They were actually lizard people. And because he had this fever, he could see this kind of green aura around them, so he knew something was off. And then when he experienced pain, he was able to see what they really looked like, and he could see that they were lizard people. Now again, the plot takes some twists and turns, so people don't believe him, and he's not able to see them again. But then eventually the dots are connected, and Buck Rogers grabs a weapon and goes onto the bridge of the ship and kind of holds everybody hostage for a moment as he's trying to prove his point, which is the ship is being taken over by alien lizard humanoids. So what he does is he turns down the thermostat. So I guess spaceships have thermostats too, right? Just like a house. So he turns it down, and of course, because the lizards are reptiles, they're cold-blooded, and they start to hibernate, right? They start to fall over. They can't withstand the cold temperatures. So that was kind of how Buck Rogers exposed the alien lizard people and saved the day, because of course they were up to something quite evil in the episode. Now, you know, when you're 9 years old and you see that, I guess it has some impression on you. I didn't really watch a lot of television, even when I was young, and there wasn't a lot of television on when I was young compared to what we see now. So maybe that just stood out in my mind. So later on, when I heard about the shape-shifting alien lizard humanoids, maybe it just kind of connected with that one episode of that TV show, and then I just found it funny. I don't know. I'll probably dig more into that. I'll try to find out more of what the reasons are behind my preference for this particular conspiracy theory. Why I find this one so interesting and I think maybe a little entertaining, right? I mean, the world of mental health can be a very serious world, right? Like, there aren't many opportunities to have a sense of humor. But when people talk about alien lizard people, that's one of those moments when, not in a clinical setting, I will kind of enjoy a little bit of a laugh, right? It's just to me, it's just a kind of a funny, it's a funny conspiracy theory.
Appeal to incredulity. That's why he likes it. Because he could use it to comfort himself and group in the other conspiracies and just say conspiracy theory, aka critical thinking, is just very silly, and he could stick with his scientism and the cult of authority worship and feel safe in the crowd.
Now look, you know, it could be true. There could be alien lizard people living among us. I don't know. I haven't done experiments myself to disprove the alien lizard people theory. I think it's interesting because it does seem kind of a little bit more out there than other conspiracy theories, which are grounded on something that you could say, okay, this could be true. But the alien lizard people, I just find that one so much different. It's so unlike a lot of the other conspiracy theories. And again, it always assumes the worst of the lizard people.
No, it actually doesn't. Again, there's many conspiracy theories revolving in them helping mankind or being some kind of objective watchers. And did anybody think he was being sincere when he said the theory could be true? Like, does he really think it's true after this whole hit piece on critical thinking, aka conspiracy theory, or distrust of corrupt profiteers, as if that's a bad thing?
Now, of course, in Buck Rogers, as I indicated, the lizard people were up to no good. So if we're going to use that particular episode of that old TV show as a basis, then the lizard people are dangerous. But who knows what the real intentions are, if they are among us. But I'm going to run under the assumption that that conspiracy theory is not true, and I'll be open to seeing evidence if new evidence arises. So
But he hasn't even seen the existing evidence. Now, I'm not saying the evidence is legitimate, but he's so clueless about the different theories, the Anunnaki tie-ins, the Snake Brothers of the Native American tribes of North America. I mean, he's just clueless about the evidence that already exists. Now, whether or not that's enough to make you believe in the theory, personally, I've seen all that evidence. I still don't think it's enough. He's saying he's open to the new evidence while not even knowing the existing evidence. So he kind of really embarrassed himself with this one. And if this is the level, see, he really actually puts in a lot more research in his other videos for the most part. Obviously, he doesn't do deep dives like MINDSHOCK, but just on generic overviews, he's usually pretty on point and not so dogmatic and silly and fallacious as he was in this video.
So there's my story from when I was younger, and maybe that kind of contributed to my preference to the alien lizard humanoids.
So yeah, and then again, he just outed himself. He assumed it wasn't true, so he's all about assumptions and not the actual scientific method, at least on this subject or when triggered. So now that we established all of that, I hope this was educational and informative, because this was rapid fire, fallacy after fallacy after fallacy, projection after projection, but a good thinking exercise nonetheless. Hope you guys enjoyed this logical examination of Dr. Todd Grande on his misunderstandings and fallacy stacking regarding conspiracy theories. If you enjoy the podcast, you could donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell for notifications. Make sure you allow your device to have those notifications come through. Or you can just go to youtube.com/MindShock to manually check for the latest episodes and peruse our ever-growing back catalog in a variety of topics, logical analyses, and true crime case deep dives. Hit that like button, share this podcast across social media platforms. Let's bring some more logic and reason back to a world being overrun by the cult of scientism. You could also check us out Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic logical analysis, co-podcast requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals of any kind, just leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.
If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to MindShock. We are back with another logical analysis with our favorite Dunning-Kruger goof, Dr. Todd Grande. Establishment shill extraordinaire. And that's if he's a shill. I mean, I suppose it's theoretically possible. He has some kind of mental disabilities, and he actually is being authentic. I mean, it's kind of hard to believe. Very, very hard to believe based on the arguments he's made. This is our second logical analysis on this goofball. And if you haven't checked out the first one, it is quite hilarious. He did a video on why people come to believe in conspiracy theories, where he's wrong on every single point. I mean, it's astounding how he's not even accidentally correct about any one aspect of conspiracy theory, conspiracy facts, and just basic history of government corruption and government operations that can be empirically verified. Not only that, but many of them are actually admitted, and after Freedom of Information Act requests, they are freely available. I mean, everything from the poisoning of St. Louis to the Gulf of Tonkin, MK Ultra, all these things that Grande not once mentions, not once, while hallucinating that all conspiracy theorists are these crazy psychotics. And again, even if they were crazy psychotics, they could still be correct about certain things. But again, the silliness is so off the charts. I mean, Dr. Todd Grande, you could teach this in basic, rudimentary, children's level logic and critical thinking classes, which is why these videos are so great. I mean, if you find Dunning-Kruger stylings amusing, they're great for entertainment value. The comedic value is just outstanding here. But the educational value is also fantastic, because the amount of logical fallacies committed in such a short period of time, I mean, it's something to behold. So, as always, if you enjoy MindShock, you want to support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell for notifications. Make sure you allow your device to have those notifications come through. You could also like and share this podcast. Help bring logic and reason back to a world where it is quickly going extinct, as we will demonstrate here in this video as well. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic logical analysis, co-podcaster request. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, non-suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. Alright, so in this video, it's actually even the title is a circular reasoning logical fallacy. Why conspiracy theories are illogical, which of course the faith-based presupposition based on idiot box propaganda indoctrination that they are in fact illogical when they are obviously not. You know, obviously there are bad people out there. They don't always act alone. So it obviously coincidence theory is what is truly illogical, but even the title of the video, you already know what you're in for with these off-the-chart Dunning-Kruger stylings from Todd Grande and the amount of logical fallacies committed. I mean, he's giving Joe Rogan a run for his money. So let's start off here.
Welcome to my scientifically informed insider look at mental health topics.
Scientifically informed. And of course, you'll never catch a shill, if Todd Grande's a shill, you'll never catch these shills ever discussing the differences between science and scientism, because their entire fallacious reasoning, or lack thereof, hinges on the fact that nobody will expose their religious blind faith in the corrupt as the religion of scientism, as opposed to following the actual scientific method with controls, where you keep in mind the burden of proof. You don't just take on blind faith, whatever you see on the idiot box. You need actual evidence to be examined objectively, logically, and neutrally. And of course, Dr. Todd Grande never does any of these things. He just comes right out of the gate with his faith-based presupposition that governments can never be corrupt, or that there's no bad people doing bad things, and pretends and hallucinates anyone thinking otherwise. It's just a crazy, illogical conspiracy theorist. And of course, Dr. Todd Grande is excellent for psychological projection as well. This is just a great video for learning. So let's continue here.
Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, why don't conspiracy theories make sense?
And again, another logical fallacy there. Why don't conspiracy theories make sense? Because if his mental capacity is not there, it's kind of like saying, why don't calculus equations make sense? Or to be even more fair, why don't arithmetic equations make sense? Well, if you actually understand the numbers, they do make sense. Whereas if you only maybe are familiar with the numbers 1, 2, and 3, and you don't really know about 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe they're like fringe, you think people are crazy that believe in those types of numbers. So when you see equations that include the numbers that you're not educated in or you don't understand, you might think the equation doesn't make sense. Or if you only do addition and subtraction, and then you see an equation that has multiplication or division, to you it's not going to make sense, but that doesn't mean it doesn't actually make sense in objective reality, because obviously they do make sense. Now, and it's also a completely separate issue in the world of conspiracy, whether a conspiracy makes sense and whether it's true. Those are two completely separate issues. And then, of course, you can't expect even that children's level realization from a guy like Todd Grande.
Now, I received a lot of questions from a video I posted recently about the flat earth conspiracy theory. And one of the themes really revolved around this question. Is there some way to look at conspiracy theories, kind of all of them grouped together, and find some commonality that can be debunked? Some way to more or less disprove all these theories without getting specific into each conspiracy theory.
Now, that by itself, I mean, how silly is that? How silly is that? Every theory is obviously different. That's like taking a true crime case. Like, how do you disprove that serial killers are responsible? Well, in some cases they are, in some cases they aren't. You can't just take all of these theories, group them under a hasty generalization logical fallacy, where you just say, oh, because it's true crime, oh, because it's conspiracy, because it's more than one person acting alone. This level of silliness. Is the establishment, if Grande here is a shill, is the establishment really that desperate that they're putting out content like this? Or is just Todd Grande that mentally weak, that thoroughly indoctrinated into the cult of authority worship, that completely brainwashed and bereft of even children's level of critical thinking skills, that he's putting out these kinds of videos? Maybe, again, I'm not hallucinating. I know what's what, or which theory it is. I'm not gonna be as goofy as this poor guy here. But yeah, maybe he's a shill, maybe he's not, maybe he's just that mentally weak, maybe he's got some kind of undiagnosed mental disabilities where it kind of flew under the radar because he was such a well-trained sheep. He was able to regurgitate the government texts throughout his indoctrination process, getting his doctorate, that he just never had to learn actual logic, reason, critical thinking of any kind, because his regurgitation abilities were just that good, where it just never came up. Who knows? People slip through the cracks. But let's continue here.
Is there some way to look at conspiracy theories, kind of all of them grouped together, and find some commonality that can be debunked? Some way to more or less disprove all of these theories without getting specific into each conspiracy theory. So I'm really looking at this from the perspective of personality theory and how that can explain why conspiracies, like the ones we see in conspiracy theories, really couldn't hold up.
Again, presupposing that they couldn't hold up. Obviously, many of them do hold up. Many of them have been proven true and admitted. So basically, you have a large burden of proof met, like, for example, the poisoning of St. Louis, where they were just spraying all these biochemical weapons throughout these areas, and then all these declassified documents. Of course, you have the admission, you have photographs of the acts being committed, you have the people involved, just like with MK Ultra, Gulf of Tonkin, the Tuskegee experiment. We can go on forever, literally. The amount of conspiracies that have been proven true, but he's hallucinating and pretending that the word conspiracy is synonymous with something not being true, something being crazy, which is, again, another fallacy. But obviously many crazy things could be true and are true. Just because it's crazy or hard to believe, appeal to incredulity logical fallacy, that doesn't mean it's not true, especially if if a burden of proof can be met for it being true. Like with all of these things he pretends aren't real. And he tries to focus, he does these straw man logical fallacies where he pretends conspiracy is only flat earth or moon landing or global warming, all these things. And of course they could be true. And in the case of the moon landing, there's just a fundamental lack of understanding on how basic children's level logic and reason works, how burden of proof works, the difference between religion and science, because he sees an authority position synonymous with some kind of gospel or godly divine statements that can't be questioned, as opposed to understanding how objectivity works. Just because someone said they went somewhere or they said they did something, that doesn't make it true. So in the world of science, you need actual proof. But for some reason, he doesn't understand these things. or he's faking. He's just playing stupid. Now again, I'm not going to pretend I know which it is. I don't know if he's stupid or if he's playing stupid. I really don't know. Or if he just really is intelligent, but again, he's just that mentally weak. And when he gets triggered, his logic switch gets shut completely off, and maybe he is capable of applying logic and reason when he's not triggered. We do see this with certain individuals as well.
So to help answer this question, I had a few different references, including Grimes and colleagues 2016 and Douglas and colleagues 2017. I'll put the references for those articles in the description for this video. So first, what are some of the conspiracy theories? Well, I don't know how many there are. I can only imagine that when you include all the variations, there are probably thousands. But I know there are certainly scores of fairly popular conspiracy theories. So some of the ones that stood out as I researched this topic were that vaccinations are really harmful, or they don't work, or they're there to control the population. That's one conspiracy theory. We see global warming is another one, chemtrails, the flat earth conspiracy theory I talked about before, this conspiracy theory that says that there was no moon landing, so that in 1969, Apollo 11, that really didn't happen. That was staged on some sort of Hollywood set or something like that. We see the Area 51 conspiracy theory. Again, there's probably several theories around Area 51, like the government has taken alien technology to make military-grade weapons.
So he doesn't even. So he's just that uninformed about any non-mainstream government-approved propaganda on the idiot box. He's not even sure if there's more than one conspiracy about Area 51. I mean, who are we dealing with here? I mean, this is going to be rough. He thinks there are probably more than one theory. I mean, there's dozens of theories regarding Area 51 and hundreds of fringe theories of just random loonies, obviously, on the internet. So the fact that he doesn't even know for sure whether or not there's even more than one theory about Area 51, I mean, that kind of sets the stage here. That really tells us all we need to know about a goof like Todd Grande.
And we also see theories like the cure for cancer is being suppressed, so that the government really has access to a cure for cancer, but they're just not sharing it with the population.
The government, I mean, wow. I mean, does this guy not read anything outside of the mainstream idiot box narrative? I mean, the amount of research going into fasting and all these other treatments for various diseases. I mean, it's crazy how it's really hard to believe that this guy's really this mentally disabled, this mentally bereft. If I had to guess, I mean, I'd have to guess he's got to be a shill. I mean, can a guy be this dumb? It's hard to believe. It's really hard to believe.
And then one of my favorites, and I say favorites because this one was a little difficult to counter because it's really so odd and eccentric.
And already he's revealing his agenda. His agenda is to counter, to support the corrupt establishment. His agenda is not to find the truth, not to be scientific or objective. His agenda is clearly to counter or debunk or make to look stupid people capable of critical thinking. People that are not simply sheep, the Dunning-Kruger crowd, the lemmings running off the cliff because the idiot box told them to. So, again, he's making it very, very clear here.
Is that elite lizards, so these are shape-shifting lizard humanoid aliens, have invaded the world, and because they're shape-shifting, they can appear to be people, and they've taken certain positions, like positions in the government, with big banks, big pharmaceutical, all that.
And he actually mentioned this in the other video, that the other logical analysis I did on him, which is, of course, it's his favorite, of course, because it's kind of like an appeal to extremes logical fallacy. I mean, this man is talented when it comes to checking all the boxes for logical fallacies. I mean, this guy's nothing but logical fallacies. He has no actual position. He can't support any kind of actual position. He's just built this house of cards of logical fallacies. Now, of course, it makes it look like his position is a little bit more reasonable when he's attacking things that most people would find silly, like the alien lizard reptilian theory, whatever you want to call it. David Icke actually kind of popularized it. And you know what's kind of funny? If David Icke is not a shill and then that theory actually is true, again, I'm not saying it is or it isn't. It's just that David Icke has been correct about so many things like Alex Jones and has shown intellect and mental strength so far superior to these Dunning-Kruger goofs like Todd Grande. Even if they're wrong, it's just curious how they are right about so many things. So even if they're wrong about this one, his appeal to extremes logical fallacy is, of course, just that. Another logical fallacy in a long line of logical fallacies. And again, we have to give Dr. Todd Grande his props here. His ability to just use nothing but logical fallacies to support his indoctrinated position is quite silly.
I think another area I find particularly interesting about the elite lizard theory, conspiracy theory, is that the lizards are also in Hollywood. So it's not just really about world domination with the lizard humanoids, it's about entertainment.
Well, again, and he exposes his own fundamental lack of understanding of even basic history, like Operation Mockingbird or the CIA infiltration of Hollywood, which is all, of course, well documented at this point. Anybody who does basic historical research on this can find this information. I actually went over it before as well. I think I went over it on the Britney Spears conspiracy podcast, as well as a few others, where, again, if this lizard conspiracy is true and they're in the CIA, obviously they could be part of CIA operations, like their infiltration of Hollywood. And again, Dr. Todd Grande is such a Dunning-Kruger goof. He's so mentally weak, and his ego is so stratospheric, and it has him on such short strings, he can't objectively, logically, neutrally, scientifically investigate any topic, really, that falls outside of what he was indoctrinated into, his faith in the establishment. And, of course, the cult of authority worship. His faith in his cult is so strong that he'll never objectively investigate or look for truth anywhere outside of that box that was created for him, and that he clings to desperately while trying to discredit anyone and everything outside of the box because it makes him mentally uncomfortable. So it's the equivalent of someone trying to take his safety blanket away. They're trying to take away his blankie with truth and questioning and actual science, but he doesn't like it. He's just too mentally weak for it. But if he understood how the idiot box works, how the indoctrination works, obviously, now I'm not saying this conspiracy is true, but if there were lizard elites or whatever, obviously they would need to infiltrate Hollywood and all of media just to maintain the illusion, to indoctrinate the population, to get them in their alpha brainwave state while they're, especially for comedies, you're in a relaxed state, your brain is susceptible to propaganda. I mean, does this goof not understand anything about propaganda? It's just weird. He's got to be playing stupid, right? I mean, I don't know, but it seems like it.
And maybe a little bit of narcissism. I don't know. But that's one of the more interesting theories. So as you can see, that's probably my favorite one, but a lot of these theories are really hinging on the same concepts. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But first, it's important to note here that not all conspiracy theories have been wrong. For example, there was this conspiracy theory that the CIA tested LSD on Americans. That turned out to be true.
Oh, wow. I'm actually shocked. I have to give Grande a brownie point here. Because in his other video, which was actually a much longer video, this one is shorter, he showed absolutely no ability to think critically or examine anything contrary to his faith-based belief system. But what you notice with these coincidence theorists, these thoroughly indoctrinated authority-worshipping cultists, they basically make it look like they're not being biased by acknowledging something that was still within their box. So, for example, if he had a class where they learned about it, and if it came from a trusted authority, like this particular conspiracy theory being exposed, because there's countless other conspiracy theories which are all true. I mean, he mentioned chemtrails. I mean, that's just aerosol spraying, geoengineering. I mean, that's all openly admitted. You can look up all the patents. There's nothing even strange about it now. Obviously, the coincidence theorist crowd years and years ago, they were denying, they were pretending and hallucinating that any kind of smoke in the sky had to have been exhaust from a plane. It had to be a contrail. There was never any testing by the government, and this is all, of course, known. It's not even classified. That's the thing, though. That's how silly some of these coincidence theorists and Dunning-Kruger goofs are. I mean, this isn't even a portion of anything that is classified or fringe. This is all basic if you just look it up. I mean, you can find it on all mainstream sources. It's weird. But this goof pretends that conspiracy, again, is synonymous with something not being true. And then he pretends, again, to soothe his own ego, to pretend he's not as mentally weak as he is, by saying, oh, he can acknowledge that there might be a conspiracy that's true, as long as it still fits inside the box, inside his cultish box, his scientism box, then it's okay. And that's kind of, in a way, that's a type of appeasement that the mentally weak have to use to justify their own lack of ability to think critically or logically. So it's their ego tricking themselves into thinking they're justified in dismissing all these other ones because they can admit that there is one that is true or two that are true, as long as the ones that are true don't trigger them. Or again, they learned it from a trusted source, again, operating on faith. They had blind faith in the source. They didn't investigate this testing of LSD or whatever objectively, logically, neutrally, scientifically. Otherwise, they would also know about all these other conspiracies, which are obviously true.
We also see these theories that the government was monitoring communications globally, like cell phone communications. Well, that turned out to be true as well.
And it is kind of funny. So he has the wherewithal to know that, but he's too dumb to realize that in another 10, 20, 30, 40 years, all of these conspiracies that he's criticizing, especially the ones that are already admitted, in another generation, they'll be common knowledge, not just fringe knowledge. But he's too silly to understand how hindsight works, how the delay of information works, how most conspiracies take 1 or 2 generations to be accepted. And it is kind of curious. Again, I don't know this guy personally. It would be curious if people who knew him, what was he saying about Snowden and all these guys way back when they were first blowing the whistle? If he's this thoroughly indoctrinated goof, my money would be on he would have called it silly. Now, when it's that obvious, he's like, oh, well, that turned out to be true. What was he saying? What was Dr. Todd Grande saying about it when it was first breaking, or when it was first theorized, or whatever, when Bill Cooper was talking about some of this stuff, invasion of privacy? I would really like to know his position because, again, we don't know if he's a shill or not. We don't know if he's actually this dumb or if he's playing stupid to play a role. But, again, we don't know. But it would be curious. So here he's kind of pretending to be more neutral by saying, oh, well, these two were true. Therefore, he does have the mental capacity to identify what is true or what is not true. I would challenge that just by the basis of if he really arrived at these conclusions that he realized these conspiracies were true, if he did it logically, objectively, neutrally, scientifically, he would also realize all these other ones are either true or they're at least legitimate in their line of inquiry, like the moon landing. But he just blindly jumps to defend the establishment narrative.
We also see these theories that the government was monitoring communications globally, like cell phone communications. Well, that turned out to be true as well. So we can't just say that all conspiracy theories are false. Again, some have been true. But what I'm really talking about here are the kind of popular conspiracy theories that have already been solidly disproven.
And so there's red flag number 1. How have they been solidly disproven? And if Dr. Todd Grande actually does possess at least children's level logic, we would expect him to demonstrate how they were disproven. Or is he just pretending they were disproven without actually showing how they were disproven? And that's how a cult operates. Obviously, if this was truly a scientific-based video, he would, and especially if it's that easy to show, he would clearly show how they have been disproven in a simple, concise fashion. Because if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough. And if he doesn't understand this topic well enough, he shouldn't be speaking about it and embarrassing himself, although I'm glad he is, because this is highly entertaining.
So again, I'm trying to debunk these conspiracy theories in general, but for any specific conspiracy theory in the short term, that's a little hard to do.
And again, he's clearly making his agenda clear here. He's trying to debunk. He's not trying to find the truth. He's being very clear here.
So what I'm really talking about here is, in the long run, conspiracies don't work. And I'll talk about why I believe that in a moment.
So how do they not, what does he mean by not work? Is he just, again, falling for these hasty generalization logical fallacies? But does this make him dumber? That he just admitted that the LSD conspiracy was true. He just admitted that the surveillance conspiracy was true. And yet the conspiracies don't work? But he just said they were true, so clearly they do work. Now, is he saying that believing something across the board in a hasty generalization logical fallacy, like all of this is false or all of this is true, Obviously, this kind of generalizing is dumb. Everybody knows that. But he's trying to pretend it's still applicable to conspiracies, even though he technically just debunked himself by admitting that these, at least two that he knows about, obviously he's very silly, uninformed, and ignorant if he's not a shill. But even a guy as clueless as Dr. Todd Grande has already admitted these two, and yet he's saying conspiracies don't work. Well, which is it? And why is he not clearly explaining why this one was true, why this one was not true? I mean, he didn't even cite how he knew the surveillance one was true, or how he knew the LSD one. Where's the evidence? Because we could play his game and just pretend they're not true also.
Another important point here is that conspiracy theories are remarkably popular. If you look at just the US population, over 50% of Americans believe in at least one conspiracy theory. And some studies say it could be more than 60% believe in one theory.
Now, what does he mean exactly? Which one? The LSD one that turned out to be true? That even he admitted was true? The surveillance one that he admitted? So it's a problem to believe that there's corruption in the world? It's a problem to be aware of corruption? I mean, what is his point here?
So we have a large number of people that subscribe to at least one conspiracy theory. Now, I think for somebody to be a conspiracy theorist, though, to define somebody in that way, they really would have to believe in more than that.
And again, he's pretending that all conspiracy theorists have definite beliefs like he does. Because, I mean, he's a cultist. So he kind of assumes people are like he is, where they just have blind faith in a certain position and they believe it no matter what. Whereas the majority of conspiracy theorists, as true to the word, they're theorizing. They don't jump to the conclusion. A small percentage do. A small percentage do, but he's committing, again, all of these fallacies, hasty generalization fallacies, and pretending and hallucinating that all conspiracy theorists fall into the same category. Most conspiracy theorists do not definitively believe in theory A or B, true or untrue. They're simply critical thinkers who are questioning the narratives brought by corrupt profiteers with a track record of lying, deception, and corruption. So basically anybody with a brain that's not a gullible goof. That's who he's labeling conspiracy theorists and pretending that's a problem to actually employ logic, reason, and critical thinking. So if he's not a shill, he really should study just the term conspiracy theorist itself and how the CIA came up with that term to try to shut down critical thinkers, because it seems like he's completely clueless about that as well as all these other logical facts. I mean, he seems to be clueless about just about everything.
I mean, usually what we see here with conspiracy theorists is they believe in dozens of these theories. And one could argue that it's all reduced really to one overarching conspiracy, which is a large number of organized evil people conspiring to cause harm.
Now, again, that is a huge straw man, because, again, as George Carlin once said, you don't need a formal conspiracy when interests converge. So is there a mass conspiracy to convince everybody that there's a God, or are there financial interests in certain religions, where in certain churches, whatever, where they all believe there's a God, but there's not necessarily a concerted conspiracy? Just because they all believe in God, that doesn't mean there's a concerted conspiracy. That doesn't mean that Christian authorities are meeting with Jewish authorities and Buddhist authorities and Muslim authorities. I mean, maybe they are. Maybe there is a mass conspiracy there. Or it just means that interests converge. So this fundamental lack of understanding of the fact that there's corrupt people out there, and they don't necessarily have to be in contact with each other to be exercising some form of deception or exploitation of humans. Again, anybody who studied basic psychology, basic history knows this, and yet Dr. Todd Grande doesn't, or he's just shilling here. Again, I really don't know.
So that could be by hiding the moon landing, that could be by using vaccinations to control people. I don't know really how that would fit in with the lizards. I guess the lizards would be that group of people for the elite lizard theory. But either way, it's really about secrecy. It's really about conspirators coming together. And this is exactly why the statistical argument against conspiracy theories is difficult to maintain. So if we think about this, if we say that all probabilities are independent of all others, which of course we know is true in some situations, but not in others, depends on what probabilities we're referring to. But if we look at something like a coin flip, if you flip a coin 4 times and you get heads each time, what are the chances that you'll get heads when you flip it a fifth time? Well, it's still 50-50 because all those probabilities are independent of the other probabilities.
It sounds like he needs to really look up the Ludic logical fallacy, because just bringing that up again demonstrates his fundamental lack of understanding of how different variables work, how each situation is different, and how, again, you don't need a formal conspiracy when interests converge. If slave plantation owners have a vested interest in maintaining the institution of slavery, they don't necessarily need to be hosting secret meetings. They just both have, or all of the members, they just have an interest in maintaining their control and maintaining their wealth and power. It's that simple. And yet, Dunning-Kruger goofs like Todd Grande just can't grasp the concept. They can't. Or, again, just playing stupid.
Each coin flip has a 50-50 chance. 50% on heads, 50% on tails. So when we see the statistical argument made against conspiracy theories, people will say, well, what are the chances that all of those conspiracy theories that somebody believes in would be true? Well, the trick is here, these probabilities may be dependent. If somebody believes that the government is conspiring and all these people have come together and they're conspiring to cause evil.
Yeah, because governments never cause evil or exploit their own citizens. I mean, democide is just a figment of conspiracy theorists' imaginations. I mean, really, though, like, Todd Grande can't be this dumb. I mean, are we really to believe he hasn't studied a lick of history? I mean, I don't know. This is just tough.
Then they could all know each other. It could be one large conspiracy. And all of these different specific theories would just be variants, would just be products of this one big conspiracy. So this is really why the statistical argument isn't great unless somebody says, well, these are separate agencies and these conspiracies are actually independent. In that case, the statistical argument would work very well. So let's say that we're looking at conspiracy theories involving NASA, the CIA, and the FBI, and all are independent of one another. And let's just say there's a 10% chance of a conspiracy like this, like the ones I've talked about, coming out.
And again, he's just pulling these numbers out of nowhere. 10% this, 10%. Hallucinating he would know the variables at play. Unless he has all those top secret clearances, he wouldn't know any of these variables anyway. And even if he had the top secret clearances, I mean, he still wouldn't know the totality of all variables, which is why it's very silly for him to even phrase this argument this way. But again, silliness and Dunning-Kruger is now becoming synonymous with Dr. Todd Grande, so it's really not that surprising that this is his line of argumentation that he chose, completely bereft of all logic and reason.
In these agencies, I think that's extremely high, but let's just say 10%. Well, for all three to happen, if they're independent, there would only be a 0.1% chance that would occur. A very low probability. So again, you have to be careful with the statistical argument, but it can be a good argument in some ways.
And again, he's hallucinating that he would know these probabilities, which of course he wouldn't, because all of these factors and variables, they're unknown. You have unknown unknowns, you have known unknowns. I mean, again, this is just basic logic, but of course, Dr. Todd Grande can't grasp it. Or again, playing stupid and shilling. So, obviously, organizations and institutions want to maintain their control and power. Obviously, some humans are corrupt and use their so-called authority positions to exercise corruption. I mean, these are all empirical facts supported by all of human history. So for conspiracies to happen independently of each other in these organizations, that could happen also, and you could have overlapping conspiracies, and you could have them coming down from one source. So again, let's not fall for black and white logical fallacies. All of these things could be true or untrue. You would need more information before hallucinating probabilities.
I'm going to be basing my argument on personality. So with that in mind, really quickly, let's talk about why people believe in conspiracy theories. Well, I think that one reason is personality traits. This tendency to find meaning from randomness and believing that this meaning affects somebody personally.
Now again, his psychological projection here is very interesting to watch, because this all applies to coincidence theorists. Of course, these statists and authority-worshipping cultists, their personality, if they're not comfortable with certain traits of humans, this corruption, they need their safety blanket. It's too uncomfortable for them to consider. They're too mentally weak to consider some of these possibilities, so they have to put their blind faith in governments, institutions, all of these things based on their personality. So that much is true, and it is also kind of silly because he's trying to, if he's going to pretend, he's not even really trying to pretend that he's about getting to the truth. I mean, he's clearly stated he just wants to debunk or counter. He's not about the truth in any way, and that's reflective of his own personality. He's too mentally weak to be a truth seeker. He's too mentally weak to be actually scientific and objectively analyze anything. One of my favorite quotes is actually Upton Sinclair. It's very difficult to get a man to understand something if his paycheck depends on him not understanding it. And that also perfectly explains Dr. Todd Grande.
We call this an idea of reference. And I know that the idea of reference is actually a symptom for some mental disorders. That's not really what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about a subclinical idea of reference. Just believing that this could happen more often than average. We also see odd beliefs and magical thinking, and again, I know this is a symptom criterion for a mental disorder, but even at a subclinical level, I think these tendencies make somebody vulnerable to believing in conspiracy theories. If we look at the construct of schizotypy, which again, taken to an extreme, would be cluster A personality disorders, that's what we're really talking about here. We're talking about subclinical manifestations in many cases.
I'm going to take this opportunity to actually read a quote from Aldous Huxley, author of Brave New World, obviously infinitely more intelligent than a goof like Dr. Todd Grande. And Grande he can't even consider these possibilities, because if he could, he wouldn't be spewing this nonsense. But if Grande just took a little bit of time, maybe looked at Plato's Cave, or again, some of the writings of Huxley or these other great philosophers, here is one of Huxley's quotes on mental illness. The real hopeless victims of mental illness are to be found among those who appear to be most normal. Many of them are normal because they are so well adjusted to our mode of existence, because their human voice has been silenced so early in their lives that they do not even struggle or suffer or develop symptoms as the neurotic does. They are normal not in what may be called the absolute sense of the word. They are normal only in relation to a profoundly abnormal society. Their perfect adjustment to that abnormal society is a measure of their mental sickness. These millions of abnormally normal people living without fuss in a society to which, if they were fully human beings, they ought not to be adjusted. And again, a Dunning-Kruger goof like Todd Grande can't even objectively, logically, neutrally consider what Huxley is stating there, as he continues to prove with basically everything he says about conspiracies.
Now, of course, as I mentioned before in my other video, somebody could believe in conspiracy theories and have no mental disorder or no irregular personality characteristics at all. That's certainly possible. But here I'm really talking about what the tendency would be, what I tend to see with conspiracy theories.
And is that really a tendency? Or is that him pretending it's a tendency to justify his blind faith in the corrupt and not actually look for truth objectively? Another Huxley quote is, when one person suffers from delusions, we call it a mental illness. When a society suffers from them, we call it being normal. Like how most coincidence theorists who have blind faith in these corrupt profiteers and the cult of authority worship, they consider themselves normal society. And Huxley really hit the nail on the head with his observations here. And they're going to fall on deaf ears with, again, Dunning-Kruger goofs like Todd Grande.
Now, other theories show that conspiracy theorists tend to be uncertain, insecure, anxious, feel powerless, and isolated.
And he just described like 90% of all humans in general. So again, with these kind of silly statements, you can't really apply any of them specifically to conspiracy theorists, because that describes there's more coincidence theorists that fit that description than conspiracy theorists. But it's kind of like saying, oh well, conspiracy theorists are brunettes and not blondes, or vice versa. Well, yeah, I mean, you'll find a lot of brunettes and blondes in the conspiracy theory camp. You'll find a lot of brunettes or vice versa blondes in the coincidence theorist camp and the cult of authority worship. So his statements here mean literally nothing. Dr. Todd Grande is like a master of demagogue. He'd make a good politician.
So believing the conspiracy theory may help them to take some control because they can now comprehend constructs they didn't understand.
And that adequately explains coincidence theorists with blind faith in authorities, because if they're too mentally weak to consider a world that's more harsh, they need to pretend that anybody who doesn't believe in these corrupt authorities, that they're the crazy ones. So it kind of soothes their dissonance and their mental weakness, which explains why they're coincidence theorists. Again, like Todd Grande, if he's not a shill.
So in a sense, they're safer because they're detecting these threats, even though, of course, the threats aren't real.
Just like all those people being experimented with LSD or being surveilled upon. Even though he admitted those conspiracies were real, he's still pretending that these other ones are definitely not real. But what's funny is that the ones that are truly afraid and insecure, they're the ones that have to pretend that these authorities have their best interests at heart, because that's a way for coincidence theorists to really take control, because they can't not have control, because if the government's are out to get them, if democide is real, if they actually learn the lessons of history. Huxley obviously has another quote on history: the real lesson of history is that men do not learn from history. Out of the most important lessons of history is that men do not learn from history. And again, Dr. Todd Grande also exemplifies this.
And we also see a sense of belonging is important for conspiracy theorists.
Because a sense of belonging is not important for coincidence theorists, because they don't want to belong to the crowd, to have that herd mentality, the sheep, the lemmings. I mean, most conspiracy theorists are actually lone wolves, as far as I've seen. Again, I've studied the topic for a lot more than Todd Grande, obviously. A lot of conspiracy theorists, I don't want to say most, a lot of conspiracy theorists, they're lone wolves. They're introverts. They don't give a crap about belonging to the crowd, which is the whole reason they're mentally strong enough to question the mainstream narratives, and they don't have that peer pressure to just believe whatever the idiot box says. So pretty much everything Dr. Todd Grande is talking about here is demonstrably false. I mean, he's really talented about being so wrong and using nothing but logical fallacies to support how wrong he is.
Usually. We refer to this as collective narcissism. So this is when you're special because you're with a group of other people that believe they're special. And this can compensate for somebody's self-esteem being threatened.
Again, perfect description of authority-worshipping cultists. They don't have the self-esteem to really question the corrupt profiteers pulling their strings. They don't have that mental strength, the self-esteem. So it's easier just to belong to the crowd. And the narcissism is they're not able to consider they're wrong, like Dr. Todd Grande. So again, he just perfectly described the authority-worshipping cultists, the coincidence theorists, whereas the conspiracy theorists are actually the opposite of everything he just said. For the most part, obviously, I'm sure you could find some that fit his description as well.
So there's a brief explanation on why conspiracy theories are maintained, why people might believe them.
The worst explanation probably that has ever been given, but okay, let's continue.
But why do they fail? How can I debunk, in general, all long-term conspiracy theories?
Why do they fail? Again, presupposing that they do fail, even though he admitted that they don't, or certain ones don't. So, again, the cluelessness of Dr. Todd Grande knows no bounds. I mean, does he not realize how badly he's embarrassing himself here? Or is he just shilling for cash and he doesn't give a crap? Or does he have these mental disabilities where he actually can't tell that he's this dumb and embarrassing himself? I mean, I'm not going to pretend I know the answer to that question.
Well, it's all really about personality. And my fundamental argument here would be that secrecy at the level needed to maintain these conspiracies would be very difficult to maintain.
Now, why does he hallucinate that? First of all, Second of all, like, difficult for him, again, people always try to compare to, does it make sense to them? Do they understand it? As opposed, does it make sense for the people executing it? Just like for a serial killer or, I don't know, some of these terrorist groups, it doesn't make sense for a random authority worshipping cultist and coincidence theorist. That's true. It doesn't make sense for them. But for, I don't know, again, like some kind of fundamentalist or some kind of serial killer, what they do makes sense to them. And even if it's difficult, again, difficulty is subjective as well. I mean, is running a marathon difficult? Is running an ultra marathon, 100-mile marathon, is that difficult? For certain people, they can't even fathom the amount of training it takes, the grueling nature of it. But for others, they do it in a week. They do it every other weekend or whatever. So again, this kind of hallucination, this one-size-fits-all, hasty generalization, black and white logical fallacy. I mean, he's just stacking so many fallacies. It's nothing but fallacies. If there's a good enough reason, which of course, if he doesn't have the clearances, he wouldn't know what it would be anyway. So he wouldn't even be able in a position to say, oh, this is a good reason or a bad reason, because he doesn't even have the top secret clearances to even know the reason. And to hallucinate and pretend that if it were true, he would know it. I mean, you can't get any sillier than this level of coincidence theory and just authority worshipping cultism. It's just crazy. And it's so obvious. I mean, only children's level logic is required to understand this. And yet, we are here with Dr. Todd Grande.
People aren't good at conspiring. That's really the bottom line.
Based on what? So again, we could look at all of these conspiracy theories that turned out to be true. What is the common denominator there? Obviously, it's compartmentalization. In all these war efforts, I mean, even World War II, there were conspiracies and top secret missions that are only being found out about now, 50 years later. They were able to maintain all of these secrets, all of this secrecy they were able to maintain for half a century, and he thinks magically that for some reason, only in these certain categories can that be done, and it can't be done in any other categories that he's too mentally weak to consider. I mean, that's basically his argument here now.
And eventually, especially if you involve a lot of people, someone will deliberately or inadvertently reveal the truth.
And that's exactly what happened. And if you look at all the conspiracies that were true, that's exactly what happened, but those people were not believed. And it took another generation or two. I mean, look at all conspiracies, JFK, all these. There were whistleblowers early on. They just weren't believed. So, again, he pretends they're crazy, and then he pretends that he never thought they were crazy after the conspiracy is already true, like the LSD, the surveillance state. They were whistleblowers early on. They simply weren't believed, called crazy conspiracy theorists. That's what it was. And then a generation or two later, it's revealed it was all true. So that aspect of it is true to a certain extent, because some people, unless there's a really good enough reason for it not to be leaked, like again, with some of these World War II conspiracies and top secret missions, I mean, this was life and death and all these things, they weren't really leaked. But for all the conspiracies he's talking about here, they were whistleblowers. And it was all revealed. He just pretends it didn't happen or those people are crazy.
So why might this happen from a personality perspective? Well, consider the big 5 personality traits we call the 5-factor model: openness to experience, extroversion, conscientiousness, agreeableness, and neuroticism. These traits are normally distributed. So if you have a conspiracy that involves 1,000 people, 2,000 people, you're going to see all different levels of all of these traits and the facets.
And again, so he's demonstrating here he doesn't understand even the basics of how any conspiracy would work if it were true. Again, I am not alleging any specific conspiracy here is true or untrue other than the ones I've mentioned. But again, compartmentalization. So he doesn't understand that a lot of these conspiracies, there wouldn't be anywhere near 1,000 people. I mean, we might be talking single digits of the amount of people that really know what it is. Everyone else is just following orders. Again, basic history here. If he just studied a lick of history, he would understand how all this works. But again, he's either that triggered, has some kind of mental disability, or he's just shilling.
Each one of these traits has 6 facets. And certain facets of these traits would be more associated with either accidentally or deliberately revealing the truth.
And again, he's also pretending here and hallucinating that with this level of conspiracy, as if these people wouldn't be screened, as if they wouldn't be screened for these clearances. So a lot of these conspiracies, if they're really, really up there, obviously these individuals would be screened. Why is he hallucinating and pretending they wouldn't be screened? I mean, the cluelessness here is just off the charts.
So breaking the link of the conspiracy. Again, it only takes one bad link in the chain to undo a conspiracy. So some traits that might be associated with failing to maintain a conspiracy would be high altruism. So this is on the agreeableness traits. This is where somebody wants to do good. Low conscientiousness would be another trait. So this would be when somebody's not careful. You have to be conscientious to maintain something as complex as a conspiracy. We see high neuroticism as a possibility, impulsivity. Somebody has difficulty resisting the temptation to talk. And in a somewhat similar way, being talkative alone could be a problem for maintaining conspiracy.
I mean, is he really that dumb that he doesn't understand that if it's life and death, if people are threatened or their families are threatened, not necessarily even explicitly, people kind of know what they're getting into. When you get into these top level clearances in the military and in these high government positions, the stakes are very high. Now, he's right. There would still be some leaks, which you do see. All these conspiracies have leaks. I mean, even the crazy lizard people conspiracy has there's government employees that claim to have seen the shapeshifters. More than one. There's numerous individuals who claim to have actually seen it in front of their eyes, and they talked. Now, call them crazy, call them wrong, that's fine, but there are still leaks. You do see those breaks in the chains, but there wouldn't be as many as he would think because, one, there's not that many people in on these conspiracies if they're true, and two, most people, when threatened, they do as they're told. So look at the sheer number in, again, some of these military, in some of these war atrocities, people just, how many of them really were that altruistic or that talkative that they just said what they did? I mean, yeah, you can find single digit cases, but when you look at the scope, the sheer amount, thousands, tens of thousands of troops involved in this, and 99.9% of them didn't talk. So again, all of history proves how wrong Dr. Todd Grande here is, how silly he is. I mean, it's hard to believe. I mean, how much stock are you going to put into a doctorate when someone like Dr. Todd Grande can get one?
So this would be plotted on extroversion, high extroversion. We also see other characteristics that could make somebody more likely to break up a conspiracy. Being narcissistic, somebody who has fantasies of wealth and power and success.
So they're going to blow the whistle and get killed and have their family killed, blowing their chance of success? I mean, he's not even logically consistent with his own line of reasoning, which is, of course, not logical. But he's not even consistent with himself. I mean, that's how silly he is.
Well, if you give up a conspiracy, if you go to the public and reveal information about some massive conspiracy, certainly that would probably lead to fame and maybe even wealth.
Really? You wouldn't get bumped off? Really? This guy's done no actual research into how people get killed. I mean, it's just I really don't know what to make of this. Can he really be this? Can his mental disability really be this severe? Or is it just that he's a shell?
How about jealousy? Somebody's narcissistic, they tend to be jealous. You get jealous of your co-conspirators and you go ahead and betray them, right? That could be something that occurs because of narcissism.
I mean, this guy supposedly, he understands basic psychology, and he doesn't understand self-preservation instinct. I mean, we're talking basics that children can understand, and yet apparently he can't. Or again, he's just playing stupid.
We also see lack of empathy, so this would be a lack of empathy with the co-conspirators, and an excessive need for admiration. Again, if you blow the lid off of something huge like a major conspiracy, people will admire you.
Or they would call you crazy. Again, has this guy not looked... Wow. This guy has done basically zero research on any conspiracies, any whistleblower, like anything. Because everything he's saying is so patently, demonstrably false. I mean, it's insane. He doesn't realize it, or he does, and he's just showing, I don't know.
Other possible traits could be high adventurousness. We see that mapped on openness to experience. And also substance use. If somebody's using substances, they're going to be disinhibited and more likely to make a mistake.
Yeah, high-ranking government officials and military personnel are probably on a whole bunch of drugs 24/7. Maybe, yeah, that's a good one, Todd Grande.
Now, in one of the studies I referenced earlier, Grimes and colleagues 2016, in this study, the researcher really looked at taking a very low probability that any conspirator would make a mistake. So this was a really conservative estimate in favor of the conspiracy staying together. And the paper specifically looked at the moon landing, global warming, vaccinations, and suppression of the cure for cancer. And what this study found is that with each one of these independently, the best case scenario would be that the gig would be up in less than 4 years.
And it was for all of them, if you go through the history.
That the conspiracy would be blown wide open and people would discover what's going on. The truth would be revealed.
Which it was, but people just call the truth crazy, of course.
So, of course, if you're talking about multiple conspiracies, this would make it more unlikely that we see a conspiracy be successful in the long run.
But again, he's also not factoring the sheep-like nature of the masses, the lemmings. It's just kind of weird because Todd Grande, he doesn't even understand the basics of propaganda, fear, psychology. It's like that KGB study that showed if you inundated a population with fear messages for however many weeks, once a certain period of time has passed, no amount of evidence proving that initial propaganda false will ever be believed by the people who were subjected to the messages of fear, which is exactly how governments control people, how propaganda works, how cults work. And Grande, of course, either totally ignorant and clueless of these facts, or, again, just a shill.
So this is, I think, a pretty good argument that large conspiracies are just difficult to maintain, and this is why these theories don't make sense.
Yeah, because going to the moon is so easy. It's way easier to go to the moon than to make a conspiracy about going to the moon, right? Because difficult things can never be done, even if there's a good reason for them. I mean, again, the silliness here just off the charts.
But when we get back to that last conspiracy theory I mentioned in that initial list, the reptile humanoids, again, this is my favorite one. My theory about why conspiracy theories are illogical kind of falls apart a little bit. We don't know the 5-factor model profiles of reptile humanoid aliens. They may not be prone to errors. They may be better at keeping secrets than we see with human beings, kind of a reptile mafia. So I think for most conspiracy theories, though, they fail because there's too many conspirators that would have to be involved.
Says who? Again, straw man, logical, fallacy. And even if there are a lot involved, just like in the military or during wartime, there's top secret missions. Some of them do have a lot of operators involved. And yet they maintain the secrets because their lives depended on it. So again, Grande, of course, either ignoring it or just that clueless.
All of whom introduce a risk to failure, so long-term success is unlikely.
And then also, is long-term success even needed? Because a lot of conspiracies, again, when the government is releasing these admissions and declassifying files so they don't care about maintaining it after a certain point, again, that's Todd Grande's analysis here completely falls apart on every level.
Again, with the reptile humanoids, this may not be the case. I'm really not sure how to make a good argument against that, just based on personality.
I mean, he can't make a good argument about anything.
You really have to start using some other areas of science to counter that one effectively. So I guess you could say my theory of personality and how it counters conspiracy theories would work for most conspiracy theories.
Or actually none, actually, once you actually analyze his theory. It doesn't make any sense on any level. But he pretends it does, or he really just is that clueless. I mean, it was interesting in the sense that it's a good example of Dunning-Kruger, logical fallacies, psychological projection, all very, very educational and hilarious in their own right. So another big thanks to Dr. Todd Grande for his Dunning-Kruger stylings. Hope you guys enjoyed another logical analysis on the MINDSHOCK podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications. Like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire, signing off.